Welcome, brave souls, to another journey through America's darkest corners. Tonight, we venture behind steel bars and shadowed walls, into the very prisons that once held the most tormented of men. These are places of cruel punishment, injustice, despair, and whispered legends of the afterlife. Among them lie at least 25 prisons across the United States, each rumored to harbor restless spirits, ghostly wails, phantom footsteps, and secrets that refuse to stay buried. As you follow me through these haunted cells, keep your senses sharp and your courage ready. Some doors once opened may never fully close. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, looms like a fortress of sorrow and shadow, its crumbling Gothic walls standing as a monument to human misery and punishment. Built in 1829, it was designed under the radical Pennsylvania system, a method meant to reform prisoners through absolute solitude. Every inmate was confined to a small cell, with a single skylight above called the Eye of God, meant to remind them that even in darkness, divine judgment was watching. They were forbidden from speaking, singing, or even seeing one another. When prisoners were led through the halls, they wore black hoods to ensure no human contact could break their isolation. What was intended as a moral experiment instead became a chamber of madness. Over the decades, countless inmates lost their sanity in those stone cells. Guards reported screams echoing through the corridors, at night agonized cries of men cracking under the weight of silence. The penitentiary's design amplified every sound. A single footstep could travel the length of a corridor, while whispers bounced between the cold walls like trapped spirits. Some prisoners scratched messages into the stone, warnings to anyone who might come after them. Others spoke of seeing ghostly faces appear in the cracks of the walls, staring back at them with hollow eyes. Even after its closure, in 1971, the air inside Eastern State feels heavy, thick with unseen presence. Visitors describe feeling watched, followed, or touched by invisible hands. Tour guides have reported hearing the faint shuffle of footsteps when the corridors are empty, the soft creak of iron doors moving on their own. In cell block 12, long rumored to be the most active part of the prison, people claim to hear whispers in the dark, murmured words that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The most chilling encounters often happen near cell block 4, where visitors have captured shadowy figures gliding across doorways. Some have described a tall, misty form pacing slowly along the hallway before vanishing into the floor. Others speak of seeing glowing orbs flicker in the corners of their vision, only to disappear when they turn to look. There are also reports of sudden cold spots, so intense they make the breath freeze in midair, as if unseen souls still linger in the same corners they once inhabited in life. One of the most unsettling stories involves the ghost of a former inmate named Joseph, a man who was said to have been driven insane by isolation. During late-night tours, visitors have reported hearing faint sobbing and scratching sounds coming from his old cell. When the door is opened, the noises stop instantly. Some have even claimed to see a shape crouched in the corner, a dark mass that dissolves into thin air the moment a flashlight hits it. Guards and workers over the years have also shared eerie experiences. A maintenance worker in the 1990s claimed that while fixing a broken lock, he felt someone tap his shoulder. When he turned around, no one was there, but the sound of heavy breathing filled the corridor. Another employee reported seeing a figure dressed in the striped uniform of a 19th century prisoner walking down a hallway before vanishing through a solid wall. Even the structure itself seems to breathe with the echoes of its past. The rusted iron bars groan in the cold, and the once silent halls now hum with faint, inexplicable noises. Paranormal investigators who've explored the site describe capturing voices on recorders, men whispering prayers, others screaming in pain. During one investigation, a camera caught what appeared to be a full apparition peering from a cell door, its face pale and indistinct, its body fading into darkness. The penitentiary's most famous paranormal legend centers around cell block 12's banging doors. Staff and visitors alike have heard the heavy steel doors slam violently, even when the area is locked and sealed. Others claim to have seen them open and close slowly, as though moved by unseen hands. Some speculate that it is the restless energy of inmates who never escaped the torment of their confinement, men whose anguish has seeped into the very stone of the building. Throughout the decades, Eastern State housed some of America's most notorious criminals, including Al Capone. During his stay, Capone reportedly told guards that he was haunted by a ghost named James Clark, one of the victims of the infamous St. Valentine's Day massacre. Night after night, Capone could be heard shouting at invisible figures, begging them to leave him alone. His cell still remains preserved, and visitors swear they can feel an overwhelming sense of dread inside it, as if his guilt still lingers in the air. The penitentiary today stands as both a museum and a relic of human cruelty, where the past refuses to stay buried. Its halls are open to tourists, yet the silence between those ancient walls feels alive. Visitors walk the same paths that countless men once paced in solitude, their footsteps echoing in haunting rhythm with those who came before. It's said that if you stand quietly long enough, you can hear faint voices drifting through the vent snippets of old conversations, prayers, or desperate pleas for freedom. Some say Eastern State Penitentiary isn't merely haunted, it's a living monument to suffering. Each cell is a capsule of torment, preserving fragments of human despair. The stone corridors, lined with flaking paint and rusted bars, seem to absorb every whisper, every scream, every final breath. No matter how many years pass, the echoes remain. As night falls over the crumbling towers and long shadows stretch across the courtyard, the building transforms into something otherworldly. The air grows cold, the silence deepens, and a feeling of being watched settles over anyone who dares to linger. The ghosts of Eastern State may not show themselves clearly, but they are always there, restless, sorrowful, and bound forever to the prison that once broke their bodies and minds. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, standing isolated in the cold waters of San Francisco Bay, is one of the most infamous prisons in American history. Known as the Rock, it was built to house the nation's most dangerous and unbreakable criminals, men who had defied other prisons and the law itself. From 1934 to 1963, its steel bars held names that sent shivers down the spine: Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. Surrounded by icy currents and treacherous tides, escape was believed to be impossible. Yet, while the walls kept prisoners inside, they also trapped something else, an energy of despair, anger, and madness that many say still lingers today. Even before it became a federal prison, Alcatraz had a reputation for darkness. Native American tribes once avoided the island, calling it a place of evil spirits. When it later became a military fortress, soldiers reported strange sounds and ghostly figures roaming the barracks. But it was during its time as a maximum security prison that Alcatraz earned its haunted legend. The isolation cells, known as the Hole, were underground chambers of pure torment. Prisoners, locked inside, spent days or even weeks in pitch-black silence. Many went mad. Some screamed until their voices broke. Others claimed to feel unseen hands clawing at them in the dark. Visitors and guards have long described eerie encounters echoing through the cell blocks. Moaning has been heard in the dead of night when the prison should be silent. Heavy footsteps echo across the floors, only for the sound to stop abruptly when no one is found. Doors slam shut without wind, and lights flicker as if controlled by unseen forces. In Cell Block D, the most feared section, the air grows unnaturally cold even during summer. Some say you can still hear prisoners whispering or sobbing, trapped in their eternal confinement. One of the most terrifying stories involves Cell 1 for D, the darkest isolation cell in the Hole. Decades ago, a prisoner was locked inside after a violent outburst. He screamed throughout the night, claiming that a figure with glowing eyes was attacking him. Guards dismissed it as hysteria till morning, when they found him strangled to death. No one else was inside the cell. Since then, visitors have reported seeing a shadowy shape lurking near that cell door. Its faint outline moving slowly before dissolving into nothing. Alcatraz's most notorious resident, Al Capone, also became part of its ghostly lore. Once the king of Chicago's underworld, Capone was reduced to a broken man on the island. He was tormented by guilt and illness, retreating to the prison's music room, where he would play the banjo during recreation periods. After his death, guards and tourists claimed to hear faint banjo music drifting from the empty shower area late at night. Even though no instruments remain, the soft, eerie melody echoes through the corridors, as if Capone himself still wanders the halls, seeking peace that never came. George "Machine Gun" Kelly, another infamous inmate, was known for his arrogance and bravado. Yet, after years on Alcatraz, he too fell silent. Inmates later said they could hear him talking to himself, whispering apologies to unseen listeners. Today, some paranormal investigators claim to capture faint voices near his old cell words too soft to decipher, but tinged with desperation and regret. Guards stationed on Alcatraz often reported supernatural occurrences, even while the prison was still operational. Some heard footsteps pacing behind them in locked corridors. Others saw figures in old-style uniforms vanish around corners. A few even claimed to feel cold hands brush against their necks as they patrolled the darkened halls. In the early 1940s, a guard conducting a nighttime count heard the unmistakable sound of a cell door opening. When he turned, he saw a faint blue light glowing inside an empty cell. Within seconds, the light faded and the door slammed shut on its own. The prison's execution chamber, though rarely used, is also said to carry heavy energy. Visitors describe a suffocating presence, as though the air itself resists being breathed. Some claim to hear chains dragging, others the sound of a cell door rattling in protest. In the old dining hall, echoes of clinking plates and faint chatter have been heard, as though the spirits of inmates still gather for meals long after their bodies turn to dust. Perhaps the most chilling phenomena occur near the former hospital wing. The infirmary treated prisoners on the edge of death, and many took their last breath there. Today, shadow figures are often seen gliding past the doorway, and visitors sometimes hear labored breathing or soft moans. Cameras malfunction unexpectedly, batteries drain instantly, and the smell of antiseptic lingers in the air even when the room is empty. The island itself seems alive at times. When fog rolls in thick over the bay, it wraps around the prison like a shroud. The waves crash violently against the rocks, and through the mist, the faint outline of the cell house looms a ghostly fortress in a sea of gray. Many who visit claim to feel the weight of the island's history pressing down on them, as though thousands of trapped souls still wander the grounds, reliving their misery over and over. Even after decades of closure, Alcatraz remains one of America's most haunted places. Paranormal investigators, historians, and thrill seekers continue to visit, hoping for a glimpse into its ghostly secrets. Some leave convinced that something beyond explanation resides there. Others vow never to return, whether it's the echo of human suffering or something truly supernatural. One thing is certain: the walls of Alcatraz still hold more than just memories. The Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio, rises from the earth like a Gothic fortress, its stone spires, iron gates, and echoing halls concealing a century of pain, fear, and human despair. Though now best known as the filming location for The Shawshank Redemption, the true history of this prison is far darker than anything Hollywood could capture. Behind its beautiful yet menacing facade lies a past drenched in blood, cruelty, and tragedy. What was once intended to reform men, as souls instead became a breeding ground for torment and death, and, according to countless visitors, that agony never truly left. Construction on the Ohio State Reformatory began in 1886, with the noble dream of rehabilitation rather than punishment. The architect, Levi Schofield, designed the structure to resemble a grand castle, believing its beauty would inspire inmates toward moral redemption. But as decades passed, that dream decayed. By the mid-20th century, overcrowding, neglect, and corruption turned the reformatory into a living nightmare. Cells built for one man held three. Disease spread rapidly through the damp, unheated corridors. Guards grew violent, and desperate inmates turned on one another. Suicides became common. It was a place of suffering disguised as salvation. The reformatory finally closed in 1990, but many believe that the misery of its inmates still echoes through the crumbling cell blocks. The air inside feels thick, heavy, with an energy that unsettles even the bravest visitors. People who step through its massive wooden doors describe an immediate chill, as though unseen eyes are watching. Guides and paranormal investigators alike claim that the building is alive with activity. Whispers in empty rooms, disembodied footsteps pacing the metal catwalks, and sudden drops in temperature that leave frost on the skin. In the East Cell Block, one of the largest in the world, guests report hearing the metallic clang of unseen cell doors slamming shut. Some have caught fleeting glimpses of shadow figures standing silently inside cells, watching. Cameras malfunction unexpectedly, lights flicker, and visitors have felt icy hands brush their backs when no one was near. At night, the corridors seem to breathe every gust of air, carrying faint moans or sobbing from unseen prisoners. Those who've dared to spend the night speak of hearing desperate pleas for help, the cries of men who may not realize they died decades ago. Perhaps the most tragic presence in the reformatory is said to linger in the warden's living quarters. Stories tell of Helen, the wife of a former warden, who lived with him in an apartment attached to the prison. One evening in the 1950s, while retrieving a jewelry box from a closet, she accidentally knocked over a loaded revolver. The gun discharged, striking her in the chest. She died soon after, leaving her husband devastated. Visitors today claim to sense her sorrow. In her old bedroom, perfume lingers in the air, though the bottles have long been empty. Some have seen her ghostly form drifting down the hallway in a pale gown, pausing near the closet where she fell. Others say they hear soft weeping in the dead of night, a sound so real it brings tears to their own eyes. The warden himself is also said to haunt the building. Years after his wife's death, he took his own life in his office, unable to bear the guilt and loneliness. Tour guides have reported doors slamming shut on their own in that room, or hearing the faint click of a revolver being cocked. Electronic equipment often dies there without explanation, as if the energy of his final act still radiates through the walls. Down in the basement lies one of the reformatory's darkest spots, the solitary confinement cells, known as the Hole. This area once broke the minds of countless men. Inmates were locked in total darkness for days, sometimes weeks, given little food or water. Many emerged insane, some never left at all. Even now, visitors claim to feel overwhelming dread the moment they step inside. A suffocating energy seems to press against the chest. Some have fainted, overcome by panic. Others report feeling grabbed or shoved by unseen hands. Cold spots swirl without warning, and strange whispers fill the silence, forming words that no one can fully understand. Paranormal investigators who've explored the reformatory have recorded countless phenomena, EVPs capturing cries, growls, and even voices saying "get out." Shadowy figures glide across hallways, only to vanish into walls. Some have captured photos showing misty outlines of faces in the cell doors or spectral hands gripping iron bars. One investigator claimed to see a man in a tattered prison uniform standing silently at the end of the corridor. When the flashlight hit him, he was gone. Even areas open to tourists in daylight have an uneasy atmosphere. The chapel, once a place of worship and repentance, often echoes with faint hymns sung by invisible choirs. The old shower room, with its long row of rusty pipes, is said to carry the echoes of screams, perhaps from inmates beaten or tortured there long ago. Guards' quarters remain equally active. Heavy boots are heard pacing the floors, and doors open as if unseen officers still patrol their old routes. The Ohio State Reformatory has been featured on numerous paranormal shows, earning its reputation as one of the most haunted prisons in the world. Yet, for those who visit in person, no broadcast can prepare them for the feeling of despair that hangs over the building. It's as if time itself stands still within those walls, preserving every ounce of suffering that ever occurred there. The West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville is a place where darkness feels alive. Its heavy stone walls seem to breathe with the memory of violence, despair, and restless spirits. Opened in 1866, this imposing Gothic fortress was built to house just a few hundred inmates. but by the early 20th century, it was overflowing with more than triple that number. The air was thick with tension, rage, and hopelessness. Life inside the penitentiary was a daily struggle for survival, and many never made it out alive. Executions were common here. Between hangings and electrocutions, nearly 100 men met their end within these walls. The electric chair, chillingly nicknamed Old Sparky, sent its victims into eternity as other prisoners listened to the hum of power and the final screams of the condemned. Some say that on quiet nights, when the halls fall silent, that low electric buzz still echoes faintly through the corridors, followed by the scent of burning metal and a shadowy figure slumped in the chair. The prison was also home to riots and bloodshed. In 1986, one of the deadliest riots in U.S. history erupted here. Inmates seized control for 2 days, and the chaos left several dead. Their blood soaked the cold concrete floors. And some guards later swore they could still hear the desperate cries of men trapped behind the barricades long after the prison was retaken. But it's the solitary confinement cells, known as the hole, that leave the strongest impression on those brave enough to enter. These cramped, pitch-black rooms once held prisoners for weeks at a time, often naked and without light, warmth, or sound. The human mind wasn't meant to withstand such torment, and many who entered the hole never left sane. Visitors today often report feeling extreme unease inside, an invisible pressure on the chest, an icy hand brushing against their neck, or disembodied whispers that seem to rise from the stone itself. Some have even claimed to see a pair of glowing eyes staring from the darkness, vanishing when the light flickers on. The prison's North Hall, once reserved for the most violent offenders, is another hotspot for paranormal activity. Tour guides and investigators often describe hearing boots shuffling down the corridor when no one is there. Others have seen shadowy figures dart between cells, as though prisoners are still trying to escape unseen. Many visitors have fainted upon entering, overcome by an unshakable sense of dread, as though something in the air feeds on fear. Then there's the story of a former inmate named R.D. Wall, who was brutally murdered by his fellow prisoners in the dining hall in 1929. They ambushed him with homemade shanks and left his lifeless body sprawled across the floor. Decades later, guards and visitors have reported seeing a misty figure drifting near the same spot, sometimes taking the shape of a man before dissolving into nothing. Cold spots and flickering lights often accompany his presence, as though the prison itself remembers his pain. Even the prison's exterior radiates menace. The towering Gothic turrets, razor-sharp iron gates, and narrow windows were designed not just to keep prisoners in, but to remind them of the punishment that awaited if they defied authority. Those who stood outside at night swear they've seen faces peering out from the barred windows. Long after the penitentiary was abandoned, a few have even captured unexplained figures on cameramen in uniforms or tattered clothes, staring down as if silently watching over the place they can never leave. Paranormal investigators from across the world have visited Mountsville, calling it one of the most haunted prisons in America. EVP recordings have captured chilling voices saying "get out" or "help me," and thermal cameras often pick up outlines of people in empty rooms. The building's energy is said to be so intense that some psychics refuse to step inside, claiming the sheer amount of suffering has left a permanent mark. Despite being closed since 1995, the West Virginia Penitentiary continues to draw thrill-seekers, ghost hunters, and curious tourists. Those who enter its gates today quickly realize they are stepping into a world where time stands still, where every sound echoes like a memory, and every shadow might be something more. The sorrow, the rage, and the fear of those who once lived and died here seem woven into the very stone, creating an atmosphere thick with lingering spirits. In the heart of Jefferson City, Missouri, the Missouri State Penitentiary looms like a grim monument to human suffering. Locals once called it the Walls, a fitting name for a place that held some of the state's most dangerous criminals and some of its darkest secrets. Opened in 1836, it was one of the oldest prisons west of the Mississippi River, operating for more than 160 years. Behind those stone barriers, thousands of men endured brutality, isolation, and fear. Even after its closure in 2004, the prison still seems alive. Only now, it's the echoes of the past that walk its halls. The penitentiary was a city within a city. It held up to 5,000 inmates at its peak, each confined within small, suffocating cells that were often overcrowded. Violence was common, almost expected. Guards carried clubs, and riots erupted without warning. Executions took place regularly, with hangings in the early years and the gas chamber later becoming Missouri's preferred method of death. Many inmates entered those chambers, but some believe their souls never truly left. Visitors today speak of an oppressive weight pressing on them as soon as they step through the gates. The air feels heavy, thick with something unseen. In the former death row area, the temperature drops suddenly, even in summer. People describe hearing whispers, low and urgent, though no one is there. Others have felt a hand brush against their shoulder or the tug of unseen fingers on their clothing. The gas chamber itself is the center of many of these ghostly reports. It still stands, as it did decades ago, to metal chairs inside a small, circular room with peeling paint and rusting pipes. Guides say visitors often hesitate to step inside. Some claim to feel dizzy or lightheaded, as if the air itself is poisoned. A few have fainted. One tourist reported hearing faint coughing and sobbing, as though someone were trapped there still, gasping for breath. Paranormal investigators have captured voices whispering, "Please, let me out," and no more. Elsewhere in the prison, the sound of heavy boots echoes down corridors, long empty of guards. In the old control center, chairs scrape across the floor on their own. Shadows move against the walls, even when no light passes through. One of the most common sightings is that of a man in a dark uniform standing in the hallway, his face obscured. When approached, he fades into thin air. Stories from former guards tell of lights flickering in cell blocks that had been without power for years. They'd lock doors only to find them open minutes later. Some refused to work the night shift after encountering phantom figures pacing inside cells that had been sealed shut. During tours, visitors have reported the faint scent of tobacco smoke, a violation in modern times, but common among inmates decades ago. The smell appears suddenly and vanishes just as quickly. Others hear the rattling of metal doors or the unmistakable clang of keys hitting the floor. Many believe the restless energy stems from the pain and violence that soaked into the prison as very stones. Over the years, hundreds of inmates died, some by execution, others by murder or disease. The 1954 riot remains one of the most infamous events in the prison's history. Fires blazed through the compound, inmates attacked guards, and 4 men were killed before order was restored. Even now, witnesses claim to see ghostly flames flicker through the windows at night, or hear the distant roar of chaos echoing through the empty cell blocks. The penitentiary's long, narrow hallways seem to hum with activity after dark. Tour guides have reported hearing footsteps following them when the building is locked. Doors slam shut behind them without cause. Some say the walls themselves seem to breathe, exhaling the memories of despair trapped inside for over a century. One of the eeriest places is the basement, where the old solitary cells lie in near total darkness. Inmates once called it the hole. The air there is colder than anywhere else in the building. Voices are heard, whispering from corners, and flashes of movement catch the eye, only to vanish when looked at directly. Some visitors leave shaking, insisting they felt something cold pass right through them. Even skeptics admit the penitentiary has an undeniable energy, something powerful, ancient, and sorrowful. Its reputation as one of America's most haunted prisons is well-earned. The screams of the condemned, the rage of the forgotten, and the agony of those who never found peace seem to linger still. The Pottawatomie County Jail, known locally as the Squirrel Cage Jail, stands in Council Bluffs, Iowa, as one of the most unusual and chilling jails ever built in the United States. Constructed in 1885, the 3-story structure was designed by William H. Brown and Benjamin F. H. O., who envisioned a revolutionary rotary jail system. It was supposed to improve security and reduce contact between guards and prisoners. Instead, It became a mechanical nightmare, one that still seems to creak and groan with the memories of those who once lived, suffered, and died inside. The design was simple, yet terrifying. Each floor held a circular block of jail cells mounted on a central iron spindle. At night, the entire structure would rotate, locking inmates inside their cells until morning. A single opening, aligned with the outer wall, served as the only access point. Guards would spin the entire floor to line up the desired cell with the door, like turning a giant, human-sized carousel. It was efficient in theory, but in practice, it became a death trap. According to old reports, one inmate was crushed to death when the mechanism jammed mid-rotation. Maintenance had failed, and the steel gears froze, trapping him inside the narrow space between bars. His cries for help echoed through the iron corridors for hours before silence fell. It took several days before workers could dismantle enough of the structure to retrieve his body. The tragedy shocked the community, but the jail remained in use for decades, claiming more lives through illness, accidents, and despair. Over the years, the Squirrel Cage Jail gained a dark reputation. Guards swore they heard chains rattling long after the cells were empty. Visitors claimed to see ghostly faces peering through the small barred windows. Even today, those who dare to explore its rusting interior speak of an atmosphere so heavy it feels alive, like the building itself remembers everything that ever happened within its walls. The groaning of old metal often echoes through the halls, especially at night. Paranormal investigators have recorded unexplained whispers, disembodied voices, and faint sobbing. One of the most chilling sounds is the unmistakable, metallic screech of turning gears. Though the rotary mechanism has been frozen for over a century, some believe it's the spirit of the man who died trapped inside, doomed to spin endlessly in the afterlife. Others say it's the echoes of countless prisoners still searching for freedom. The jail's architecture contributes to its eerie energy, with its narrow, spiral staircase and small windows filtering in weak light. Every corner seems to hold a shadow that shifts just out of sight. The cells are cramped, stacked like iron cages within the circular frame, giving the space a claustrophobic feeling that deepens with each step. The air feels thick, carrying the faint scent of rust and age. Many visitors describe sudden cold spots or the feeling of unseen hands brushing their shoulders. During its years of operation, the jail housed everyone from petty thieves to violent offenders. Some inmates reportedly lost their sanity within those rotating walls. The isolation, the grinding of metal, and the sense of being constantly watched broke many spirits. After its closure, in 1969, the jail was preserved as a museum, and while it stands as a monument to architectural innovation gone wrong, it's also become one of Iowa's most haunted places. Local legends speak of a spirit wearing old prison stripes wandering the corridors. Tour guides have reported hearing footsteps pacing the upper floors when no one else is there. Some nights, the old elevator seems to move on its own, despite having been inoperable for decades. Security cameras have captured fleeting shadows that vanish when approached. Volunteers claim to have heard their names whispered softly in empty rooms. Those sensitive to the paranormal describe the energy as restless and suffocating, as if the souls trapped there never truly left. Visitors often feel dizzy or disoriented near the center mechanism, the place where the inmate's fatal accident occurred. One investigator once claimed to feel a sudden pressure around his chest, like invisible hands tightening, forcing him to step back. When he reviewed his recording later, a faint male voice could be heard murmuring, "Can't get out." The Squirrel Cage Jail is one of only a handful of rotary jails ever built, and the only one still standing, with all three levels intact. What was once intended to revolutionize incarceration now serves as a reminder of human error and the dangers of playing with confinement and control. The mechanisms, long corroded by time, remain silent by day, but many who visit after dark insist they hear the old machinery stirring, turning slowly in the dark, as if awakened by unseen forces. Even skeptics have left the building uneasy. Some dismiss the hauntings as imagination fueled by atmosphere, yet few can deny the weight of the past that clings to its walls. The voices, the footsteps, and the sorrow embedded in the iron all tell a story of invention turned tragedy. The Potawatomi County Jail remains a time capsule of 19th century cruelty and innovation, a place where metal meets memory, and where the echoes of the dead refuse to be silenced. Today, the Squirrel Cage Jail stands not only as a historic landmark, but also as one of America's most haunted relics. Visitors who walk through its narrow corridors often leave with more than photos. They leave with an unshakable feeling that something, or someone, is still watching. The ghostly hum of the forgotten machinery and the mournful whispers of lost souls ensure that even in stillness, the Squirrel Cage Jail will never truly rest. ChatGPT said, "The Burlington County Prison in Mount Holly, New Jersey, is a building steeped in history, legend, and the lingering presence of the past. Constructed in 1811, it is the oldest operating prison building in the United States, a remarkable relic of early 19th century penal architecture. For more than 150 years, it housed a wide spectrum of prisoners, from petty criminals to violent offenders. And the walls of this fortress-like structure witnessed countless human dramas, despair, and according to local legend, the restless spirits of those who never left. Today, it stands as a museum, preserving its history for visitors while offering a chilling glimpse into the darker side of incarceration. The prison's architecture was designed to impose order and control. Thick brick walls, small barred windows, and narrow hallways created an environment of confinement and intimidation. Inside, the cells were small and unyielding, designed for maximum efficiency rather than comfort. Prisoners lived under strict supervision, their movements monitored, and their liberties restricted. While the prison's design was innovative for its time, it also created an atmosphere ripe for fear, tension, and, as stories suggest, lingering spiritual unrest. The basement of the Burlington County Prison has earned a reputation as the most haunted part of the building. Many visitors describe an oppressive energy that seems to weigh down the air, a sense of unease that intensifies with every step. Numerous reports claim encounters with a tall male apparition who roams the dark corridors, his presence felt more than seen. Witnesses often describe sudden drops in temperature, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them when no one is there, and disembodied voices calling out in anguish. Some say the spirit moves silently, a shadowy figure observing from the darkness, while others report being nearly chased by unseen forces. Paranormal investigators and ghost enthusiasts have documented strange phenomena in the basement for decades. Recording devices capture faint cries, whispers, and the occasional low groan. Sounds that cannot be attributed to the building settling or external noise. Security cameras have occasionally picked up fleeting shadows or figures that vanish the moment anyone tries to focus on them. People exploring the basement often report a feeling of being watched, a sensation so tangible that it prompts sudden chills or an instinctive urge to flee. These accounts have given the basement an almost mythic reputation among locals and tourists alike. The history of the prison itself feeds the stories of hauntings. Over its 154 years of operation, countless inmates passed through its cells, many of them dying within the facility. Illness, violence, and executions were part of daily life, and the despair that pervaded the halls left an imprint on the building. Some legends claim that the tall male apparition is a former inmate who met a violent end in the basement, unable to find peace. Others suggest he could be an old guard or warden, someone who spent his life in and around the prison and now lingers to watch over it. Whatever the truth, the stories persist, repeated by those who have experienced the inexplicable themselves. Visitors to the museum often report feelings of disorientation and unease, particularly in the basement and other confined areas. Sudden cold spots, unexplained noises, and objects appearing out of place contribute to a growing sense that the past has not fully released its hold on the building. Some visitors have even claimed that they have been touched or brushed by unseen hands, while others describe hearing their names whispered softly in the darkness. These personal experiences reinforce the legend that the spirits of Burlington County Prison are active, particularly in the areas where suffering was greatest. The prison was finally decommissioned in 1965, But its closure did not end the stories of paranormal activity. With the building converted into a museum, the public gained access to a site that had once been secretive and forbidding. Guided tours often include tales of ghost sightings and supernatural experiences, and many guests are drawn not only by the historical significance of the building, but also by the eerie, otherworldly atmosphere. Even skeptics, who may initially dismiss the stories as imagination, frequently leave with a newfound sense of unease, recounting sudden chills, unexplained sounds, or the sensation of being followed. The combination of historical significance and supernatural reputation makes Burlington County Prison a compelling destination for those interested in both American history and paranormal investigation. As one walks through the museum today, it is impossible not to sense the weight of its past. The creak of old floorboards, the echo of footsteps through narrow hallways, and the faint smell of age and neglect serve as reminders of the many lives that intersected within these walls. The building itself seems alive, holding the memory of prisoners, guards, and all who experienced the institution firsthand. The stories of the tall male apparition and other spirits are not confined to legend alone. Many who have spent time in the basement report seeing the figure at the edge of their vision, always elusive, always just out of reach. Others recount hearing the shuffling of heavy boots or the faint rattle of chains when no one else is present. The sense of being watched is almost universal, with both casual visitors and seasoned investigators acknowledging the unsettling presence that lingers in the shadows. These experiences have cemented the prison's reputation as one of the most haunted historic sites in New Jersey. Burlington County Prison is more than just a museum. It is a living monument to the past, a place where architecture, history, and the supernatural converge. Visitors are reminded that this was once a functioning prison, a place of confinement, punishment, and human suffering. The tales of ghosts and apparitions are intertwined with the building's history, each story a reflection of the lives once held within its walls. Whether these spirits are real or a manifestation of memory and imagination, the experience of visiting the prison is undeniably powerful. The Nelson County Jail in Bardstown, Kentucky, stands as a chilling relic of 19th-century law enforcement and domestic life, a building where the lines between confinement and home were blurred. Built in the early 1800s, this historic jail is unique in that it served a dual purpose. It was both a place of incarceration and the private residence of the jailer and his family. Thick stone walls enclosed the cells, while modest living quarters for the jailer were seamlessly integrated, creating an unusual environment where domestic life unfolded alongside punishment, fear, and suffering. Over the years, the jail has gained a reputation for the supernatural, particularly as the alleged home of the restless spirit of Martin Hill, a convicted murderer who died while awaiting execution. Martin Hill's story is woven into the fabric of the jail's history. Convicted of murder, he was confined within the jail's stone cells while awaiting the date of his execution. Accounts suggest that Hill's final days were marked by despair, anger, and terror. Local legend holds that he died either from illness or the psychological toll of imprisonment, never making it to the gallows. The story of his death quickly became a part of the jail's dark lore, and according to countless reports, his presence has lingered ever since. Visitors to the Nelson County Jail often report strange experiences, particularly in the areas that once housed Hill. Whispers echo through the empty halls, soft voices calling out in tones that seem human yet impossible to place. Some describe these voices as fragmented sentences, snippets of conversation, or plaintive cries for freedom. Others hear footsteps pacing the corridors, heavy or light, seemingly belonging to someone moving through the cells or climbing the narrow staircases. The sounds are particularly unsettling because they often occur when no one else is present, leaving visitors to question whether the jail itself is alive with memory. One of the more unusual reports involves the sighting of bonnets drifting along the hallways. These ethereal objects appeared to float through rooms and cells as though carried by unseen hands or spirits. Some suggest that these are manifestations of women who once lived in the jail with the jailer, while others believe they may be connected to Hill or other inmates, echoes of domestic life and sorrow entwined with the suffering of prisoners. Witnesses describe seeing the bonnets turn corners, pause in doorways, or vanish suddenly, leaving behind a chill and an unsettling sense of presence. The architecture of the jail contributes to its haunting reputation. The cells, constructed from thick stone and iron bars, are cold and foreboding. The small living quarters of the jailer are modest and sparse, yet they share walls with the very cells where prisoners awaited judgment. This proximity creates a strange, almost claustrophobic energy, as the cries and footsteps of inmates would have been heard daily by the jailer and his family. Today, visitors walk through these spaces and report a lingering sense of tension, as if the emotions of the past have soaked into the walls, refusing to fade with time. Paranormal investigators have frequently visited the Nelson County Jail, seeking to document the strange activity that has been reported for decades. Audio recordings have captured whispers and groans that seem impossible to explain. Some investigators report sudden drops in temperature, cold spots that appear and disappear without reason. Others have felt the sensation of being followed, or even touched, by an unseen presence as they move through the cells and hallways. Cameras have caught shadows that move independently of visitors, and motion detectors occasionally register activity when the building is otherwise empty. These accounts have reinforced the jail's reputation as one of Kentucky's most haunted historic sites. The story of Martin Hill is central to the jail's mystique. Some historians speculate that his spirit is not alone, that the combination of fear, death, and despair created an environment that drew other restless entities over the years. The whispers and footsteps may belong to multiple spirits, each with its own history, grievances, and connection to the jail. However, Hill remains the most frequently reported. His presence felt most strongly in the corridors that were once his prison. Those who claim to see him describe a tall, shadowy figure, sometimes glimpsed in the dim light, moving silently from cell to cell or standing in the corner, watching. Visitors often describe a unique feeling upon entering the jail, an oppressive heaviness, as if the building itself carries a memory that weighs on the living. This sensation intensifies in the areas closest to Hill's former cell, and many have reported a mix of fear, sadness, and an almost tangible sense of sorrow. Some even claim that personal items or equipment are inexplicably moved, that doors close or latch on their own, or that faint, cold drafts sweep through rooms where no ventilation exists. These experiences contribute to the jail's legend, creating a narrative that blends historical fact with paranormal speculation. The jail's dual function as both a prison and a residence amplifies the eerie atmosphere. The presence of living quarters in such close proximity to the suffering of inmates creates a layered, complex energy that is palpable to many visitors. The overlap of domestic life and incarceration, comfort and terror, seems to have left an indelible mark on the building. Today, it serves as a museum, preserving this history and allowing the public to explore the environment that once shaped such intense human experiences. For many, the Nelson County Jail is more than a historical site. It is a portal to the past, a place where the line between the living and the dead feels fragile. The stories of whispers, footsteps, and drifting bonnets continue to draw ghost hunters, historians, and curious visitors alike. Those who walk its hallways are confronted with the duality of its past, a place where law and justice met confinement and suffering, and where one man's tragic death seems to echo forever. Whether skeptics or believers, most visitors leave with a profound sense that the jail's walls hold more than stone and mortar. They hold the memories, grief, and restless spirits of the people who once called it home. Nevada State Prison, located in Carson City, Nevada, is one of the oldest and most infamous prisons in the United States. Established in 1862, it remained in operation for 150 years, closing its doors in 2012. Over its long history, the prison became notorious not only for the criminals it housed, but also for the grim and often brutal events that took place within its walls. It is perhaps most famous for being the site of the first gas chamber execution in the United States. a grim milestone in the nation's history of capital punishment. Beyond its historical significance, Nevada State Prison has developed a reputation as one of the most haunted correctional facilities in the country, a place where the echoes of the past seem to linger long after the lights go out and the gates are locked. The prison was constructed at a time when the western United States was still in its formative years. Its architecture reflected the austere and intimidating design common to 19th-century penal facilities. Massive stone walls, narrow windows, and heavy iron doors created an atmosphere of confinement and control. The cell blocks were designed for maximum security and minimal comfort. Prisoners lived in harsh conditions, often enduring overcrowding, disease, and the psychological strain of isolation. Executions were a regular part of life at the prison, and the constant presence of death and despair left an indelible mark on the building itself. Nevada State Prison was the site of numerous executions over the years, with the most infamous being the first use of the gas chamber in 1924. The execution of G.I. John, a Chinese gangster convicted of murder, marked a new and controversial chapter in the history of capital punishment. This method of execution, designed to be more humane than hanging, was chilling in its own right. Witnesses described the process in stark detail, and the lingering memory of that day contributed to the prison's haunted reputation. Over time, more executions would take place here, cementing the facility as a site of fear, grief, and finality. The presence of death in such a concentrated space has fueled stories of restless spirits and supernatural occurrences. Visitors and paranormal investigators often report experiences that defy explanation. One of the most commonly cited phenomena is the appearance of spectral guards. Witnesses describe shadowy figures, dressed in old-fashioned uniforms, patrolling the cell blocks, repeating the motions of their last watch, as though trapped in an eternal shift. These apparitions are usually seen near the upper levels of the prison, moving silently from one corridor to the next. Some observers claim the figures make no noise, yet their presence is unmistakably cold sense of authority and vigilance that sends chills down the spine. In addition to ghostly guards, the prison is said to be haunted by shadowy figures of prisoners. Many of these apparitions are seen lingering near the cells where executions took place, their movements repetitive, as if reliving their final moments over and over. Some visitors have reported seeing a figure rise from a cell and pace the hallway before vanishing abruptly. Others claim to hear moans, screams, and whispers echoing through empty corridors. These tormented wails are described as heart-wrenching and desperate, giving the impression of souls trapped between life and death, unable to move on. The old cell blocks, with their narrow hallways and iron bars, amplify the sense of unease. The architecture itself contributes to the eerie atmosphere, as sound travels easily and shadows fall in ways that can confuse even the most rational observer. Paranormal investigators often note sudden temperature drops, unexplained breezes, and objects moving on their own. Doors have been reported to swing open or slam shut without cause, and lights flicker in areas where the electrical wiring is intact. Many believe these manifestations are residual energy from decades of suffering, violence, and death. Nevada State Prison was home to more than just notorious criminals. It also housed those responsible for enforcing the law within its walls. Prison guards worked long shifts, often under immense stress, and their presence, combined with the despair of inmates, created a layered, complex energy that some claim has lingered long after the facility closed. Reports of spectral guards suggest that the memory of duty and authority is somehow imprinted into the very walls of the prison, replaying endlessly for those sensitive enough to perceive it. The prison's history of executions, violence, and harsh confinement ensures that its reputation as a haunted site continues to grow. Visitors to the site often leave with stories of inexplicable phenomena, including footsteps echoing in empty corridors, shadowy figures disappearing around corners, and faint cries that cannot be traced to any living source. Some claim to hear muffled conversations or the creaking of heavy iron doors, as if the past itself is moving through the building. These experiences create a palpable sense of tension and fear, drawing both ghost hunters and history enthusiasts to explore the prison. Despite its closure in 2012, Nevada State Prison remains a powerful reminder of the dark side of American penal history. It stands as both a historical landmark and a location steeped in legend, where the human cost of law and order is visible in the lingering energy of the building. The stories of spectral guards, shadowy prisoners, and tormented whales create a haunting narrative that captivates visitors, blending history and the supernatural in a way that few other sites can match. Even today, the presence of the past feels alive. Visitors report feeling watched in the cell blocks, sensing movement just out of the corner of their eyes. The echoes of the tormented souls and the spectral figures seem to replay endlessly, their stories frozen in time, yet somehow accessible to those who enter the prison's walls. The combination of historical significance, violent events, and documented paranormal activity ensures that Nevada State Prison is remembered not just as a facility of incarceration, but as a place where the living and the dead coexist in an uneasy spectral harmony. The Ohio Penitentiary in Columbus, Ohio, was one of the most notorious prisons in the United States, known not only for its size and longevity, but also for the tragedies and suffering that unfolded within its walls. Established in 1834, the penitentiary housed thousands of inmates over its 140-year history, and it became infamous for harsh conditions, deadly epidemics, violent riots, and one of the most catastrophic fires in American prison history. Even after its demolition in 1997, the site continues to attract attention from paranormal enthusiasts and local residents, who claim that the ghosts of those who died there still inhabit the ruins, corridors, and surrounding ground. The Ohio Penitentiary was built during a time when prison design was focused more on containment than rehabilitation. Its massive stone walls, barred windows, and high fences reflected a philosophy of strict discipline and punishment. Cells were small and overcrowded, often housing multiple inmates in spaces designed for one. Disease spread easily in such close quarters, and epidemics of cholera, influenza, and other illnesses claimed countless lives over the years. Inmates lived in constant fear, not only of illness, but also of violence from other prisoners and harsh treatment from guards. These conditions left a heavy mark on the building, and according to reports, the energy of suffering never fully dissipated. Riots were a frequent occurrence at the penitentiary, often sparked by inhumane conditions, overcrowding, or disputes among prisoners. Guards sometimes responded with excessive force, and chaos frequently erupted, leaving both prisoners and staff injured or dead. One of the most notorious events in the prison's history was the 1930 fire, a tragedy that would cement the Ohio Penitentiary's reputation as one of the most haunted locations in Ohio. On April 21, 1930, a fire broke out in the upper tiers of the prison. The fire was devastating, leaving a lasting scar on the city and the survivors who witnessed the horror. Even decades after the penitentiary's closure in 1984 and its eventual demolition in 1997, ghost stories persist. Visitors and paranormal investigators report experiencing strange occurrences throughout the ruins and surrounding grounds. Some claim to hear disembodied screams or cries, echoing through areas where cells once stood. Others report seeing shadowy figures darting between ruins or glimpsing shapes at the edge of their vision that vanish when approached. The most commonly reported phenomenon is the sense of being watched, particularly in areas near the site of the 1930 fire. Witnesses describe an oppressive feeling, as if the energy of hundreds of lost souls is still trapped in the location, replaying the terror of that night over and over. The prison's corridors are said to retain an eerie resonance. Visitors report footsteps following them along the paths, even when the area is empty. Doors, now long gone, are sometimes felt as if they close or rattle against invisible resistance. Some have claimed to smell smoke or charred wood near the remains of the fire's destruction, a sensory echo of the disaster that claimed so many lives. These phenomena create a haunting atmosphere, where the past feels tangible and the boundary between the living and the dead seems to blur. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site report a variety of supernatural occurrences, Electronic voice phenomena. EVP recordings frequently capture faint moans, urgent whispers, or cries of "help me" that cannot be attributed to any natural source. Motion detectors sometimes register activity when no living creature is present. And some cameras capture fleeting shadows moving through open spaces where no one is visible. One of the most chilling aspects of these reports is the sense that multiple entities are present, their energies layered and overlapping, reflecting decades of death, despair, and trauma within the penitentiary. The Ohio Penitentiary's notoriety also stems from its historical architecture, which contributed to the intensity of these experiences. The cell blocks were arranged in a tiered, narrow design, creating long, echoing hallways where sound travels unnaturally and shadows shift unpredictably. Even in ruins, the outline of these structures gives the impression of confinement, a lingering reminder of the harsh conditions endured by thousands of prisoners. Visitors walking through the area often report feeling disoriented, as if the site itself warps perception and amplifies their sense of unease. Many local legends speak of the spirits of the fire victims, who are said to haunt the areas where they died. Some witnesses claim to see figures in old prison uniforms or shadows moving across open spaces, their faces frozen in expressions of panic. Others describe hearing chains rattling or doors slamming, as if the penitentiary itself is replaying the chaos of past events. Stories of spectral figures are not limited to the fire victims. Some claim to have encountered shadowy shapes that resemble former guards, patrolling invisible corridors, their presence a reminder of the authority that once governed the prison. Despite its demolition, the Ohio Penitentiary continues to attract ghost hunters, historians, and curious visitors alike. Its legacy is one of tragedy and suffering, but also of fascination and intrigue. The ruins, the grounds, and even the memories embedded in the surrounding area all contribute to a sense that this was a place where life and death, despair and fear, converged in profound ways. The stories of hauntings serve as a testament to the human impact of the penitentiary, keeping the memory of those who suffered within its walls alive long after the physical structures were removed. The site is now a location where history and the supernatural intersect. Visitors often describe experiences that are difficult to explain, from sudden cold spots and ghostly apparitions to disembodied sounds and feelings of intense dread. These phenomena make it clear that the Ohio Penitentiary, despite being demolished, is far from empty. The spirits of the past, those who endured epidemics, riots, and the devastating fire of 1930 are said to remain, walking the grounds, whispering in the ruins, and reliving the horrors of their confinement for anyone brave enough to witness them. Deer Lodge Prison, often referred to as the Old Montana Prison, stands as a stark reminder of the harsh realities of 19th and 20th century incarceration. Located in Deer Lodge, Montana, it was constructed in 1871 to house the state's growing population of convicts, and it quickly earned a reputation for brutal conditions, strict discipline, and violent unrest. Over the decades, the prison became infamous not only for its punishment and control, but also for the suffering and desperation that permeated its walls. Today, it operates as a historic site and museum. But even in its quiet, preserved state, visitors claim the energy of the past still lingers. Echoing footsteps, slamming cell doors, and disembodied whispers seem to haunt the corridors, a testament to the decades of hardship endured within. From its earliest days, Deer Lodge Prison was designed to be secure, imposing, and intimidating. The stone walls were thick and unyielding, the barred windows narrow and high, and the cells cramped and austere. Prisoners were expected to endure long hours of work under strict supervision, living in conditions that were harsh even by the standards of the time. Disease was common, food was sparse and poor in quality, and the psychological strain of isolation took a heavy toll. The combination of physical deprivation and constant surveillance created an atmosphere rife with tension, fear, and despair. Riots became a recurring feature of prison life, often erupting in response to overcrowding, abuse, or inadequate provisions. Inmates would clash with guards, and conflicts could escalate quickly, leading to injuries or fatalities. The violence was a reflection of both the desperation of the prisoners and the rigid, often brutal methods of prison authorities. Stories from the prison's history recount chaotic outbreaks where prisoners broke free from their cells, fought with one another, and were ultimately subdued through force, leaving lasting scars on both the building and its inhabitants. These events have contributed to the prison's eerie reputation, with many claiming that the energy of such turmoil has left a residual imprint that can still be sensed today. Visitors to the old Montana prison frequently describe strange, unexplained phenomena within the cell blocks. One of the most common reports involves hearing footsteps echoing through the narrow hallways, particularly on the upper floors where the older cells are located. The sounds are often heavy and deliberate, as if an unseen inmate is pacing the corridors, retracing steps that may have been walked countless times over decades. These auditory experiences are sometimes accompanied by the clanging of cell doors opening and closing, a noise that seems to emanate from empty rooms, startling visitors and staff alike. Disembodied whispers are another frequently reported occurrence. Some visitors claim to hear their names called softly from deep within the cell blocks, as if the prisoners of the past are attempting to make contact or warn them. Others report fragmented voices carrying through the hallways, shouts, laughter, or cries that seem impossibly real, echoing off the stone walls with a clarity that belies the emptiness of the spaces. These experiences create an unsettling sensation, blurring the line between history and the present moment, and leaving those who witness them with a lingering sense of unease. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Deer Lodge Prison, documenting occurrences that suggest the presence of restless spirits. Electronic voice phenomena, EVP recordings, often capture faint murmurs or phrases that cannot be explained by natural sounds. Motion sensors sometimes detect movement in areas with no living presence, and thermal cameras have recorded cold spots in locations where no drafts exist. Investigators report a pervasive feeling of being watched, particularly in the older cells and hallways, and some have even claimed to feel light touches or sudden pressure on their shoulders, as if guided or confronted by invisible entities. The architecture of the prison itself contributes to its haunting reputation. The long corridors, narrow stairways, and cramped cells create a sense of confinement and isolation that seems to amplify paranormal experiences. Sound travels unusually in these stone hallways, carrying echoes and amplifying noises that might otherwise go unnoticed. Shadows fall in unpredictable ways, creating the illusion of movement where none exists. Yet many visitors insist that what they see and hear cannot be explained by light and acoustics alone. The very design of the building seems to preserve and replay the anguish of those who spent their lives within its walls. Historical accounts of the prison's violent incidents often mirror the reports of paranormal activity. Areas where riots occurred are particularly active, according to witnesses, with some claiming to see fleeting images of prisoners fleeing or fighting. The older cells, where inmates suffered in isolation or punishment, are reported to be especially charged with energy, eliciting strong emotional responses from visitors. Some even claim to experience feelings of intense sadness or panic. Sensations believed to be residual echoes of the torment endured by inmates over the decades. Even after its closure in 1976, the legacy of Deer Lodge Prison continues to draw attention. As a museum, it allows the public to explore a significant piece of Montana's history, from its role in law enforcement to the personal stories of those who lived and died there. Yet the presence of unexplained phenomena ensures that a simple historical visit often becomes something more. Chilling encounter with the past, a sense of stepping into spaces still haunted by human suffering. The combination of historical brutality, confined spaces, and violent events has made Deer Lodge Prison a compelling location for those interested in the paranormal. The echoing footsteps, slamming doors, and whispers that visitors report are reminders that the past does not always remain silent. The energy of decades of incarceration, disease, and conflict seems embedded in the very stones of the prison, replaying in ways that defy explanation. For those who walk its corridors today, the experience is a mixture of historical fascination and eerie apprehension, a confrontation with a past that refuses to remain buried. The Moundsville Penitentiary in West Virginia stands as one of the most haunted and chilling landmarks in the United States. With its towering Gothic architecture and grim stone walls, it looms like a fortress from another era, place that has seen more than a century of violence, despair, and death. From the day it opened in 1876 until its closure in 1995, the penitentiary was both a house of punishment and a home to terror. Nearly 1,000 people lost their lives here through executions, riots, murders, and suicides. Today, the prison is quiet, but those who enter after dark swear it is anything but empty. Visitors on ghost tours often report shadowy figures gliding along the corridors, unseen hands brushing against their skin, and the restless sounds of spirits who refuse to leave. The prison's story begins in a time when West Virginia sought to establish its own state. Facilities following the Civil War, the Moundsville site was chosen for its proximity to the state capitol and its elevated ground, but also for something older and more mysterious, a massive prehistoric burial mound built by the Adena people more than 2,000 years earlier. Locals have long whispered that constructing a prison beside such an ancient site brought a curse. Whether superstition or not, what followed in the decades to come was a history drenched in tragedy. Moundsville Penitentiary was designed in the Gothic Revival style, resembling a medieval castle, complete with turrets and battlements, but its beauty was deceiving. Inside, life was brutal. Inmates were packed into small, cold cells that offered little light or warmth. Violence was constant, with fights breaking out daily among prisoners who struggled for power or simple survival. Guards enforced strict discipline, often through beatings and isolation. Disease spread easily, and hopelessness hung over the population like a heavy fog. The combination of overcrowding, neglect, and brutality created a pressure cooker that would eventually explode into chaos. Executions were a regular occurrence within Moundsville's walls. For decades, hangings were carried out in a small, enclosed space where prisoners could hear the creak of the rope and the final drop of their condemned peers. In the 20th century, the electric chair replaced the gallows. Nicknamed Old Sparky, it was built by an inmate and used to execute 9 men. Witnesses described a strange phenomenon that followed each execution: lights flickering, sudden cold drafts, and an eerie silence that settled over the room, as though the building itself absorbed the life that had just been taken. Beyond executions, countless inmates met violent ends through murder. Rival gangs turned on one another with makeshift weapons. Guards were attacked during riots. When the riot finally ended, several men were dead, their bodies left as reminders of the prison's long history of bloodshed. Some say their spirits never left. Visitors claim to see figures pacing the upper cell blocks, their forms flickering like shadows against the cold stone walls. The North Hall, where the most dangerous prisoners were kept, is considered the heart of Moundsville's paranormal activity. This section housed murderers, escapees, and those in solitary confinement. The cells remained dark and claustrophobic. Their metal doors rusted, but still capable of slamming shut with unnerving force. Many who visit report feeling an intense sense of dread as they step inside. Cold spots appear suddenly, and voices are heard whispering in the silence. Some people claim to see faces peering out from behind the bars, vanishing the instant they turn to look. One of the most frequently encountered spirits is believed to be that of an inmate named R.D. Wall, who was brutally murdered by his fellow prisoners in the basement's boiler room. Visitors often describe hearing muffled screams or seeing a fleeting figure in the shadows of that space. Others speak of feeling a sudden chill, as though someone has brushed past them in the dark. The sense of anger and fear that lingers there is said to be overwhelming, a haunting echo of Wall's violent end. Another well-known ghost is thought to be the spirit of a guard who was killed during an escape attempt. He is said to patrol the grounds even now, his heavy boots echoing through the corridors during the quiet hours of night. Witnesses describe hearing the rhythmic sound of footsteps, followed by the jingle of keys, as though the guard continues his eternal rounds, ensuring that the inmates he once oversaw remain behind invisible bars. Throughout the prison, strange phenomena continue to be reported. Doors open and close without cause. Objects move on their own. Cold breezes drift through hallways where no windows exist. Some visitors have captured photographs showing human shapes where none were visible, in-person misty outlines, faces, or even the faint image of a man in a uniform. EVP recordings often pick up voices saying single words or names, their tones faint but unmistakable. The most chilling reports come from those who feel an icy hand touch their shoulder or hear a whispered voice close to their ear when no one else is near. The prison's chapel is another area steeped in mystery. Once a place of worship and redemption, it now feels heavy with sadness. Tour guides tell of hearing hymns sung softly in the distance, even when the building is empty. Others have reported seeing faint lights, like candles flickering in the dark. Some believe these are the spirits of inmates who sought forgiveness in their final days, still hoping for peace long after death. Despite its grim past, Moundsville Penitentiary has become a place of fascination. Thousands visit each year, drawn by its architecture, its history, and its reputation as one of the most haunted places in America. Ghost tours take guests through the cell blocks, the yard, and the execution chamber, offering both history and mystery in equal measure. For some, the experience is thrilling. For others, it's deeply unsettling. Many leave convinced that the prison's past has not yet released its grip on the present. Eastern State Hospital's prison wing in Williamsburg, Virginia, holds a dark and uneasy place in American history. It was one of the earliest attempts to merge mental health care with incarceration, a combination that blurred the line between healing and punishment. Founded in the 18th century, Eastern State Hospital began as a refuge for those considered lunatics, a term used in an era when mental illness was barely understood. But over time, as overcrowding, social stigma, and criminal insanity cases grew, a section of the hospital evolved into what became known as the prison wing, a place where those deemed too dangerous or disturbed for ordinary confinement were kept. It was here that medicine, punishment, and neglect intertwined in ways that would haunt the building forever. Behind its red brick walls, the prison wing of Eastern State Hospital became a labyrinth of despair. Cells were narrow, dark, and airless. Iron bars covered the windows, and the sound of chains echoed through the corridors. Inmates were a mixture of patients suffering from severe mental illnesses and criminals whose conditions made them unfit for trial. Some were violent, others merely lost in the depths of their minds. Many arrived with the hope of recovery or redemption, yet few ever walked out again. Over the decades, hundreds died inside, their identities fading into the hospital's forgotten records. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw the rise of brutal and experimental treatments under the guise of psychiatric care. Electroshock therapy, hydrotherapy, and lobotomies were performed in the name of science. In the prison wing, where patients were already restrained, these procedures were often conducted in conditions of extreme isolation. The cries of those undergoing treatment could be heard through the walls, echoing down the long, dimly lit hallways. Nurses and attendants reported that the screaming sometimes continued long after the procedure ended, long after it should have been physically possible. As the years went on, the hospital's reputation grew increasingly grim. Overcrowding led to inhumane conditions. Patients were kept in restraints for days at a time. Some left chained to their beds or confined in padded cells with little more than a slop bucket and a thin blanket. For many, life inside the prison wing was a slow descent into madness, where time ceased to have meaning. Some begged to be released, others forgot who they were entirely. It was said that at night, when the halls fell silent and the lanterns were dimmed, strange noises echoed through the building. Guards and nurses spoke of footsteps pacing the upper levels, doors creaking open on their own, and soft weeping coming from empty rooms. Some dismissed it as imagination, the product of exhaustion and the eerie acoustics of old. But others were convinced something darker was at play. The energy of pain, fear, and death seemed trapped in the very walls of the place. By the mid-20th century, reform movements began to change the approach to mental health care in America. Yet, for Eastern State Hospital, the prison wing remained a relic of an older, crueler time. It was finally closed off, the heavy iron doors sealed, and the cells left to gather dust. The hospital continued to operate in other capacities, but few dared to enter the old wing. Maintenance workers reported tools disappearing, lights flickering out without cause, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. Some refused to go in at all after dark, saying that the air itself seemed to hum with restless energy. When ghost hunters and historians began investigating the site in later years, they found an atmosphere unlike any other. Modern equipment picked up cold spots and sudden electromagnetic spikes. Infrared cameras recorded shadowy figures moving along the corridors. Some visitors claimed to hear distant screams, so faint they might have been mistaken for wind, while others caught voices on recording devices, whispering words like help, stay, or home. The old treatment rooms seemed especially active, with doors that creaked open and closed without reason, as though unseen hands still tended to the routines of long-dead doctors and patients. The morgue beneath the prison wing became another focal point for paranormal activity. It was here that unclaimed bodies were stored before being taken away for burial, or sometimes forgotten entirely. Visitors described feeling sudden chills when standing near the old examination tables. Some report seeing fleeting glimpses of figures in hospital gowns, their faces obscured by shadow. Others claim to hear the faint clatter of surgical tools, or the echo of footsteps on the tile floor when no one else is present. The smell of antiseptic and something faintly metallic occasionally drifts through the air, impossible trace of the building's past. The staff who work in the modern sections of Eastern State Hospital acknowledge the legends but approach them with quiet respect. Some believe the energy that lingers is a reflection of the suffering that once filled the halls, a kind of psychic residue left behind by those who died in confusion or pain. Others think the spirits themselves remain unable to rest because they were never understood, never helped, and never freed from their torment. The blending of criminal punishment with psychiatric treatment created an environment where cruelty and compassion collided, and the result seems to have left a permanent scar on the building's soul. Today, visitors who walk the perimeter of the old prison wing can still feel its presence. The windows are dark, their glass long gone or covered by rusted bars. Ivy crawls up the brick, softening the edges but failing to hide the weight of history beneath. Occasionally, during quiet evenings, a faint sound carries from within, a metallic clang, a door's slow creak, or what some swear is the echo of a scream. Local residents speak of seeing dim lights flickering behind the barred windows. Though the building has no electricity running through that section anymore, the story of Eastern State Hospital's prison wing is a grim reflection of a time when fear often masqueraded as medicine. It stands as a reminder of how society once treated those it did not understand, locking them away, experimenting on them, and ultimately forgetting them. And yet, the building itself refuses to be forgotten. It endures, haunted not just by spirits, but by memory. Moyamensing Prison once loomed over South Philadelphia like a fortress of sorrow. Built in 1835, its massive granite walls and looming towers were meant to project authority, security, and justice. For more than a century, it served as one of Pennsylvania's most feared institutions, a place where thieves, murderers, and the condemned waited for judgment or death. Though the prison was demolished in 1968, its shadow has never truly lifted. Locals say the ground where Moyamensing once stood remains haunted by the restless spirits of those who met their end there. On quiet nights, when the city falls still, faint cries are said to echo through the darkness, as if the ghosts of executed men still wander the space that once confined them. When Moyamensing Prison was constructed, it was considered an architectural marvel. Its design followed the Gothic Revival style, with imposing towers, pointed arches, and heavy, forbidding walls. The building stretched over several acres and was divided into separate sections, one for debtors, another for women, and the largest for criminals sentenced to hard labor or awaiting execution. The prison's design emphasized isolation, a concept inspired by the Eastern State Penitentiary model. Inmates spent long hours alone in their cells, intended to reflect on their crimes and seek moral redemption. In practice, however, the system bred despair and madness. The cells were small and cold, with stone walls that seemed to swallow sound. A single, narrow slit served as a window, allowing only a trace of daylight to filter through. Prisoners ate, slept, and worked in solitude. Silence was enforced with ruthless precision, no talking, no communication, and no human comfort. The isolation was meant to purify the soul, but for many, it led only to mental collapse. Guards reported inmates screaming into the night, clawing at their walls, or whispering to unseen companions. Executions at Moyamensing were grim affairs. For decades, the gallows stood as a permanent fixture within the prison walls, a reminder to all of what awaited the condemned. Hundreds of men were led up those wooden steps, their final words swallowed by the cold air before the trapdoor dropped beneath them. Later, the method of execution changed to the electric chair, but the atmosphere of dread remained the same. Witnesses often described a heavy stillness in the air before an execution, an unnatural calm that seemed to hang over the entire building. Afterward, lights would flicker, doors would creak, and guards swore they could hear faint sobbing from the empty cells nearby. Among the most infamous prisoners held within Moyamensing's walls was H. Holmes, one of America's first known serial killers, captured and tried in Philadelphia. Holmes was incarcerated at Moyamensing while awaiting execution in 1896. Even he described the prison as oppressive and strange. He claimed to hear whispers at night, as if unseen figures were watching him. When he was finally hanged in the yard, witnesses said the rope twisted unnaturally, taking long minutes to end his life. Ever since, some have claimed that Holmes's ghost remains tied to the ground where he died, his restless spirit trapped by the same evil that once drove him. Over the years, guards and inmates alike told stories of eerie encounters within the prison's walls. Some saw shadowy figures gliding down the corridors, vanishing into the darkness. Others spoke of cell doors slamming shut with no one nearby, or heard the shuffle of unseen footsteps echoing along the stone floors. Cold spots would appear suddenly, even in the heat of summer. The most chilling tales came from the execution chamber, where strange noises were heard long after the room was empty. Groans, whispers, and the faint creak of a rope swinging in the dark. By the early 20th century, Moyamensing had gained a reputation not only as a place of punishment but as a house of despair. The city had grown around it, and residents in nearby neighborhoods began reporting strange happenings of their own. Some claimed to hear the clang of metal gates late at night, even though the prison was blocks away. Others saw ghostly silhouettes along the outer wall, men in tattered clothing who would vanish when approached. Streetlights near the old prison reportedly flickered without reason, and dogs refused to go near the site, growling at unseen presences. When the prison was finally closed and demolished in 1968, many hoped that the haunting legacy of Moyamensing would be buried with it, but the stories only grew. The land where the prison once stood was redeveloped, yet construction crews complained of unease. Tools went missing, strange cold drafts swept through newly built structures, and several workers reported hearing disembodied voices calling out from beneath the ground. Some claimed to feel sudden pressure on their shoulders, as if invisible hands were trying to restrain them. One man reportedly quit after seeing a full apparition, a pale figure in old-fashioned prison garb, staring silently before fading into thin air. Local historians believe that the restless energy surrounding the site comes from the hundreds of souls who died unjustly or violently behind Moyamensing's walls. Records from the 19th century show that executions were often public spectacles, attended by crowds who came to witness death as entertainment. Others perished from disease, starvation, or abuse at the hands of cruel guards. The bodies of unclaimed prisoners were buried in unmarked graves near the prison grounds, their names lost to time. Many believe it is their spirits that linger still, bound to the earth where they suffered and died. Even today, the streets that run through what was once the prison yard seem to carry echoes of the past. Residents speak of hearing faint cries in the early morning hours or footsteps behind them when no one is there. Some claim to have seen fleeting images reflected in window spaces that are not their own, eyes that seem filled with sorrow or anger. During foggy nights, the atmosphere grows especially heavy, as if the air itself remembers the weight of the old prison walls. Moya Mensing's legacy is more than stone and steel. It is a tale of fear, punishment, and lingering regret. Though time has erased the physical structure, it has not silenced the memories imprinted upon the land. The ghosts of the executed, the forgotten, and the condemned are said to walk still. Their stories whispered through the wind and carried in the chill that sweeps across South Philadelphia. Rising from the misty waters of San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz Island has always carried an aura of isolation, fear, and legend. Once known as the Rock, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary became one of the most feared prisons in American history. Between 1934 and 1963, it held some of the nation's most notorious criminals, murderers, gangsters, and escape artists who tested its walls, but rarely its will. But even after the prison closed, stories of eerie music, phantom footsteps, and chilling whispers have ensured that Alcatraz's legend never died. Alcatraz was designed to break men. Surrounded by icy, unforgiving waters, escape was nearly impossible. The cell blocks were stark, each cell barely enough space for a man to stand and stretch his arms. The steel bars clanged shut with a finality that echoed through the long, damp corridors. Inmates like Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, all spent years within these walls. Discipline was absolute, silence was expected, and punishment came swiftly. Over time, despair settled into the very stones of the building, and some say that energy never left. Cell Block D was known as the Hole. It was where the most disobedient inmates were sent for solitary confinement. The cells were cold and completely dark, save for the faint flicker of a guard's flashlight during rounds. Prisoners kept their often reported seeing things in the dark, glowing eyes watching from corners, icy hands brushing against their faces, whispers calling their names. Many emerged from those cells broken, muttering about shadows that moved on their own, even today. Visitors on ghost tours claim to feel sudden drops in temperature near the entrance of D Block, as though someone unseen is still standing watch. One of the most famous legends is that of Al Capone's ghost. During his time at Alcatraz, Capone's health deteriorated due to untreated syphilis. In his later years, he became paranoid and withdrawn, spending his days playing the banjo in the prison's shower area because he feared being attacked in the yard. After his death, guards and visitors have claimed to hear faint banjo music drifting through the empty corridors at night, often coming from areas long closed off to the public. The eerie sound is said to echo across the cell blocks, vanishing as soon as someone dares to follow it. Another enduring story is that of the unseen prisoner in Cell 1-4D, one of the most feared solitary cells. In the 1940s, an inmate placed there reportedly screamed through the night that something inhuman was in the cell with him. The next morning, guards found him dead, his face frozen in terror. The autopsy showed strange marks around his neck, as if strangled by invisible hands. On that same day, during a head count, guards swore they saw the dead man standing at the back of the line, only for him to vanish before their eyes. To this day, some visitors claim to feel oppressive energy inside Cell 1-4D, while others insist they hear faint screams echoing from its walls. During Alcatraz's operation, death was never far away. One of the most famous escape attempts occurred in 1962, when Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers disappeared into the night, using a raft made of raincoats. Their fate remains unknown. Some say they drowned, while others claim their spirits returned, pacing the cell block where they once planned their daring escape. Guards who served after the event told of hearing faint scratching sounds in their old cells, as if someone was still tunneling through the walls. After the prison closed in 1963, Alcatraz became a place of fascination. Tourists, historians, and ghost hunters began visiting the island, drawn by both its grim history and its supernatural reputation. Many have reported cold spots, disembodied voices, and ghostly apparitions in photographs. Some hear the metallic clang of unseen doors or distant cries that echo across the bay. Even rangers who work the night shifts speak of footsteps following them through the corridors when no one else is around. In the old hospital wing, shadows are said to move on their own. The surgical tables, once used for inmate operations, now sit empty under flickering lights. Visitors often describe feeling dizzy or overwhelmed there, as if the building itself is trying to push them away. One paranormal investigator recorded faint moaning sounds and what seemed to be whispered words, "Let me out." Others have claimed to see shapes passing behind barred doors or glowing figures vanishing through walls. Even the guard tower, now empty and rusting, seems haunted by the ghosts of those who once kept watch. Some say they've seen the silhouette of a uniformed guard pacing the catwalk, rifle slung over his shoulder. When approached, the figure fades into the fog. It's as though the duty to keep Alcatraz secure never ended, even in death. Perhaps what makes Alcatraz so chilling is that it's not just haunted by spirits, but by memory. The weight of isolation, cruelty, and hopelessness that once filled the cells still clings to every corridor. Visitors often describe an unshakable sense of sorrow when stepping inside, as though the walls themselves remember every scream, every confession, every broken man who once sat behind the bars. On foggy nights, the island disappears from view entirely, swallowed by the mist. Locals on the mainland say that's when the ghosts come out. They claim to see faint lights flicker from the windows, hear distant sirens, and catch echoes of chains dragging across the ground. Fishermen out on the bay report music drifting over the water, soft, melancholy notes that sound eerily like a banjo. Whether it's imagination or something beyond understanding, the stories persist. Alcatraz remains one of America's most haunted places, a monument to human cruelty, isolation, and regret. The spirits that walk its halls may not seek vengeance, only acknowledgement. A reminder that even when the prison closed, the island never truly found peace. For nearly 170 years, the Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City was a place of fear, punishment, and despair. Built in 1836, it opened before the infamous Alcatraz and became one of the oldest operating prisons west of the Mississippi. Over the decades, it gained a chilling reputation, earning the grim nickname the bloodiest 47 acres in America. Behind its gray limestone walls, violence was constant, and death was common. Even today, long after its closure, visitors swear the prison still echoes with the cries of the condemned. The penitentiary was designed to instill discipline through hard labor and isolation. But instead of reform, the inmates faced years of brutality, overcrowding, and hopelessness. By the mid-20th century, the prison held more than 5,000 inmates, far exceeding capacity. Guards maintained control with batons and fear, while gangs ruled the cell blocks after dark. Many inmates never left alive. Stabbings, hangings, and savage beatings were frequent. The thick stone walls absorbed decades of suffering, and those echoes still seem to linger in the air. Riots plagued the penitentiary throughout its history, but none were more infamous than the one in September 1954. What began as a small uprising quickly spiraled into chaos. Inmates set fires, smashed cell doors, and attacked guards. The night sky glowed red as flames consumed buildings, and terrified residents of Jefferson City watched from across the river. When order was finally restored, the inmates were dead, dozens injured, and much of the prison lay in ruins. Many say that on quiet nights, you can still smell the faint scent of smoke drifting through the old corridors. And some visitors claim to hear the distant shouts of men trapped in that night of violence. Executions also cast a dark shadow over the Missouri State Penitentiary. The gas chamber, still preserved today, became the site of 40 state-sanctioned deaths. Prisoners were strapped into steel chairs, and cyanide pellets were dropped into acid beneath their feet. The deadly hiss of gas filled the chamber, and within minutes, the condemned would stop breathing. The room remains as it was left, cold, sterile, and eerily silent. Yet guides who visit late at night say they feel pressure in their chest or smell bitter almonds, the scent associated with cyanide. Some even claim to see hazy figures seated in the old chamber, as though the dead are waiting for their final release. Among the prison's countless tales, one stands out, the ghost of an inmate named James Prettyboy Floyd. While there's no official record of the notorious outlaw being held there, locals claim his spirit was drawn to the prison after death, perhaps to visit old associates or confront his own legend. Visitors have described seeing a man in a 1930s-style suit walking near the administrative wing before vanishing through the wall. Others have captured glowing orbs and shadowy silhouettes in photographs, especially near the solitary cells, known by many as the prison's dark heart. The solitary confinement wing, known as A-Hall, is among the most haunted parts of the facility. Prisoners were often kept there for weeks, sometimes months, in pitch darkness. The air was damp, the smell of mold thick, and the silence maddening. Former inmates spoke of going insane in those cells, hearing whispers that weren't real, and footsteps that never came. Today, guides and paranormal investigators report strange phenomena in the same area. Sudden cold drafts, unseen hands brushing against their backs, and whispers that seem to come from inside the walls. One visitor described hearing his own name whispered softly in the dark, even though he was completely alone. Tour guides who spend hours inside the abandoned prison have countless stories of their own. One recounted leading a group through the old women's wing when a sudden chill swept the hall, and every flashlight flickered out simultaneously. Moments later, a woman in the group screamed. She felt something cold grip her hand. When the lights came back, she swore she saw a faint, gray figure standing at the end of the corridor. Others have seen the same womanly apparition drifting through the infirmary, believed to be the ghost of a nurse who took her own life after witnessing to many deaths. In the former death row section, heavy footsteps can be heard pacing the floor. Doors creak open on their own, and cell doors clang shut with such force that even hardened ghost hunters flinch. Some claim to hear men's voices, murmuring prayers or singing hymns, just as condemned prisoners once did before execution. One particularly chilling encounter occurred when a group of investigators captured an electronic voice recording of a man saying, "It's not over." No one else was in the room at the time. Even the exercise yard carries a lingering unease. Weeds now push through the cracked pavement, and the rusted watchtowers stand as sentinels over the ghostly silence. Visitors walking there at dusk often report seeing faint movements near the fence, fleeting glimpses of figures pacing, as if prisoners are still walking their daily rounds. Occasionally, someone catches the metallic sound of keys jangling or the sharp bark of a guard's order, echoing from nowhere. Orbs of light, sudden cold spots, and even full-bodied apparitions are common reports among tour participants. Many leave the prison pale and shaken, swearing they'll never return. Cameras malfunction, batteries drain within minutes, and faint images appear in group photos, faces of men who died long before the last inmate left the building. Historians say the violence and despair of the Missouri State Penitentiary left an imprint that time cannot erase. Thousands of men and women passed through its gates, but many never left. Their lives, their pain, and their stories seeped into every brick. Even after the prison closed in 2004, its dark legacy continued. Today, it stands as both a historical site and one of the most haunted locations in America. Paranormal investigators come from around the world to explore its cold halls, hoping to capture proof of what so many already believe, that the spirits of the penitentiary are still serving their sentences. As night falls over Jefferson City, the limestone walls of the old prison loom against a darkening sky. The air grows still, the temperature drops, and a deep silence settles in. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps echoes down the corridor. A door slams in the distance. Somewhere in the shadows, a voice whispers, "Help me." Deep in the shadow of Tennessee, as Smoky Mountains, stands a place that time has not tamed. Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary. Built in 1896, it was never meant to be a symbol of rehabilitation. It was designed as a fortress of punishment, a last stop for the state's most dangerous criminals. Encased by jagged cliffs and dense forests, escape seemed impossible. The isolation was its own form of torment, and the echoes of misery still ripple through its empty corridors today. From its earliest days, Brushy Mountain was more than just a prison. It was a living nightmare. Inmates were forced into grueling labor in nearby coal mines, chipping away at the dark earth with bleeding hands and broken spirits. Accidents were common. Men were buried alive in cave-ins or crushed beneath collapsing beams. Their bodies were often never recovered, and locals whispered that their souls still wander the tunnels, forever digging in the dark. Visitors say that on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can hear the distant sound of picks striking stone and the mournful hum of forgotten voices rising from beneath the ground. The prison itself looms like a Gothic relic, with stone walls thick enough to withstand both man and time. Cold winds sweep through the abandoned cell blocks, carrying faint whispers and the metallic scent of rust. Some say the air feels charged, as though the building itself remembers every scream, every fight, every desperate plea that was ever uttered within its walls. Guards who once worked there spoke of seeing cell doors swing open on their own, hearing keys jingle in empty hallways, and feeling eyes watching them from the shadows. Brushy Mountain's history is soaked in blood. Riots erupted multiple times throughout the 20th century. Born from unbearable conditions, overcrowding, starvation, and relentless violence. The 1950s saw one of the most brutal uprisings, when inmates seized control of parts of the prison, attacking guards and rival gangs alike. By the time order was restored, several men were dead, their blood staining the concrete floors. Even today, dark stains remain in some corners of the prison, stubborn reminders of that savage night. Paranormal investigators who have entered the old cell blocks claim to feel sudden chills, as though invisible hands brush against their skin, and they often hear faint shouting that seems to echo from nowhere. Perhaps the most infamous name tied to Brushy Mountain is James Earl Ray, the convicted assassin of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. After being sentenced in 1969, Ray was transferred to Brushy, where he remained for nearly 3 decades. Unlike many inmates, he was not feared but despised, a man marked by history. Ray's presence left a heavy imprint on the prison. In 1977, he attempted a daring escape, along with several others, slipping into the surrounding wilderness. For 55 hours, the mountains swallowed him whole. But Brushy's natural defenses, the steep ridges, dense forest, and harsh terrain, worked as they always had. Ray was found, exhausted and starving, only a few miles from the prison walls. Locals still say the mountain refused to let him go. When James Earl Ray died in 1998, his story did not end. Guards who worked during his final years have spoken of hearing strange noises near his former cell after his passing. Some claim to have seen a pale figure resembling Ray standing by the cell door, staring out into the hall before fading away. Paranormal teams who visit the prison often pick up unexplained voices in that area. Faint whispers that sound like murmured apologies, or perhaps confessions. Visitors walking alone have felt cold air rush past them or heard faint footsteps following close behind. Many believe Ray's spirit lingers there, restless and burdened, unable to escape the prison walls that once defined his existence. The cell blocks, now silent and decaying, seem to breathe with unseen life. The clanging of metal, the soft murmur of unseen voices, and the heavy thud of phantom boots are all familiar sounds to those who dare to enter after dark. Flashlights flicker, cameras malfunction, and even seasoned investigators admit the place feels different, heavier, darker. One visitor described the sensation as being watched by 1,000 unseen eyes. Another swore she heard a man whisper her name directly into her ear when she was completely alone. The infirmary wing holds its own collection of terrors. Once used to treat stab wounds, infections, and tuberculosis, it's said to be one of the most active parts of the old penitentiary. The metallic scent of antiseptic still lingers in the air, and some visitors report seeing shadowy figures moving between the old hospital beds. One guide told of hearing a faint, rhythmic tapping from one of the rooms, the sound of a patient's foot hitting the bed frame, just as it did moments before he died decades ago. No one was in that room when the sound began. Solitary confinement, known by prisoners as the hole, may be the darkest corner of Brushy Mountain. The cells are small, damp, and completely devoid of light. Men who spent time there often left broken, their minds fractured by isolation. Many refuse to enter those cells even decades after their release. Today, visitors who step inside often describe feeling instant dread, a crushing pressure that makes it hard to breathe. Some have even fled in panic, claiming to hear whispers in their ears or feel invisible hands grabbing their arms. Brushy Mountain closed its doors in 2009, but it never truly emptied. The prison has since become a museum and tourist site, offering ghost tours that draw thrill seekers and paranormal investigators from across the country. Many leave shaken, convinced they've experienced something otherworldly. Tour guides tell stories of seeing glowing orbs hovering in the corridors, hearing distant screams, or catching fleeting glimpses of inmates pacing in their cells. Locals in nearby Petros say the prison has a presence that extends beyond its walls. On still nights, strange lights flicker across the mountainside. Dogs bark at nothing. Some travelers passing through the winding roads swear they've seen figures in old prison uniforms walking near the tree line, vanishing as soon as headlights strike them. The truth is, Brushy Mountain was built to contain evil, and in doing so, it absorbed it. Every act of cruelty, every desperate cry, every ounce of human suffering has sunk deep into its stone walls. The ghosts that remain are not gentle. They are fragments of rage, pain, and regret, trapped in the place that broke them. Lorton Reformatory, standing quietly on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., carries a chilling legacy that time has not erased. Built in 1910, the prison was intended as a progressive alternative to the brutal penitentiaries of its era. Inmates were expected to work the land, learn trades, and reform through labor. But as years passed, the ideal faded into neglect, and Lorton became known for its harsh conditions, overcrowded cells, and whispered tales of suffering. When the prison finally shut its gates in the 1990s, the silence that followed did not bring peace. The buildings, now crumbling and abandoned, became a place of eerie presence, where echoes of the past seem unwilling to fade. Today, Lorton's remains stretch across a desolate landscape. Red brick cell blocks stand hollow and broken, windows shattered, doors hanging loosely from their hinges. The once bustling courtyards are overtaken by weeds, and rusted barbed wire curls around the fences like skeletal vines. To the casual visitor, it looks like any other ruin, a forgotten piece of history reclaimed by time. But those who venture deeper speak of strange sensations and unexplainable sights that suggest the prison is far from empty. The most common reports involve shadowy figures moving through the corridors. They appear just at the edge of vision, dark shapes gliding from one cell to another, disappearing into walls or melting into the dim corners of the hall. Paranormal investigators describe seeing what looks like prisoners pacing behind the bars, as if reliving endless nights of confinement. Some have even reported the silhouette of a guard standing watch in the upper walkways, motionless, observing the trespassers below. When approached, these figures vanish without a sound, leaving only a heavy stillness behind. Sound plays a crucial role in Lorton's ghostly atmosphere. Visitors often describe hearing the clanging of metal chains echoing through the empty halls, sharp, rhythmic, and unnervingly close. The source is never found. Sometimes the noise is accompanied by faint footsteps, the creak of old cell doors, or the distant murmur of voices whispering in the dark. These sounds are said to travel from one wing to another, as if the building itself is replaying fragments of its past. Even on calm nights, the wind carries an unnatural chill through the corridors, and the air feels thick, heavy, almost watchful. One of the most unsettling areas of the prison is the solitary confinement wing. Here, prisoners were once locked away in total darkness, sometimes for weeks. The cells are small, the walls scarred by fingernail marks, and the doors still bear the weight of rusted locks. People who step inside describe feeling sudden temperature drops, waves of dread, or an invisible pressure on their chest. Some claim to hear faint crying or whispers echoing from within the walls themselves. Cameras malfunction, batteries drain instantly, and those who linger too long often leave with the overwhelming sense that they were not alone. Even outside the main structures, strange phenomena continue. Near the old workshops and yards, ghostly lights have been seen flickering at night, bluish orbs drifting along the ground before fading into darkness. Locals say that if you listen closely on a quiet evening, you can hear the faint hum of machinery and the clatter of tools, as though invisible workers still carry out their endless shifts. The line between the past and present blurs easily here, each sound and shadow hinting at lives trapped in a loop that refuses to break. Over the years, Lorton Reformatory has drawn ghost hunters, historians, and thrill-seekers alike. Some come searching for proof of the paranormal, others to feel the weight of history that lingers in the air. What they all agree on is that Lorton is different. The silence here is not ordinary. It vibrates with memory. Every corridor seems to breathe. Every sound carries a story, and every shadow feels like a remnant of a soul unwilling to move on. Joliet Correctional Center in Illinois stands like a cold monument to punishment and pain. Built in 1858 from limestone, quarried by the very inmates who would later fill its cells, it looms with the unmistakable weight of history. While pop culture immortalized its facade in the Blues Brothers, those who've walked its echoing corridors know a different truth, one steeped in suffering, violence, and the restless dead who may still remain within its crumbling walls. When Joliet opened its iron gates, it was heralded as a modern marvel of penal design. Rows of thick stone cells stretched along drafty hallways, meant to break the spirit as much as to contain the body. Prisoners were locked away for crimes ranging from petty theft to murder, many enduring hard labor under brutal conditions. Disease spread easily in the damp air, and punishments were harsh: solitary confinement, whippings, and endless toil in the prison quarries. The walls absorbed everything: the screams, the prayers, and the hopelessness that festered behind bars. By the mid-20th century, Joliet's population had swelled far beyond capacity. Guards described it as a pressure cooker of despair. Violence between inmates became routine, and suicides occurred with chilling frequency. Some officers claimed the darkness of the place took on a life of its own, a tangible presence that pressed against the senses. Many would later confess they felt watched, even when no one was there. After the prison's closure in 2002, investigators and thrill-seekers began to explore its ruins, searching for signs of the supernatural. What they found was something more unsettling than mere stories. Ghost hunters recorded disembodied voices on digital recorders, gravelly whispers saying, "Get out," and still hear. One paranormal team claimed to capture the sound of metal doors slamming in unison, though every block had been locked open. Others described a freezing chill that followed them from cell to cell, lingering long after they left. In cell block C, a shadow figure has been seen pacing behind the bars where no light should cast a shadow. It moves slowly, almost thoughtfully, before fading into the stone. Visitors who have encountered it often describe a sudden heaviness in their chest, as if the air itself turns against them. Security footage once caught a fleeting white mist drifting across the catwalk, shaped vaguely like a man in uniform. Former guards tell of a more specific spirit, the ghost of an inmate known only as Red. He died in the 1940s, found hanging from a beam after weeks of solitary confinement. Red was said to be a quiet man, wrongly accused of assaulting another prisoner. Since his death, faint sobbing has been heard near his old cell, and sometimes a pair of glowing red eyes appear through the bars before vanishing into darkness. But Red isn't alone. Many visitors report seeing phantom inmates walking through the corridors as if still serving time. A group touring the East Wing once spotted several figures in striped uniforms standing near the end of a hallway. When the guide raised his flashlight, they dissolved like smoke. Moments later, the sound of boots echoed down the empty passage, one slow step at a time. One of the most chilling tales centers around the prison chapel. Once a place meant for redemption, it now radiates a sense of sorrow that even skeptics acknowledge. People entering the chapel describe an overwhelming sadness, often breaking into tears without understanding why. AVP sessions there have captured faint hymns sung by unseen voices, the words barely audible but unmistakably human. Perhaps the most famous ghost story tied to Joliet is linked to an unknown prisoner who was beaten to death in the early 1900s after attempting escape. The legend says his spirit roams near the outer wall, still trying to find a way out. Several nighttime visitors claim to have seen a faint silhouette scaling the limestone, only to disappear before reaching the top. Sometimes, a scraping sound can be heard, nails against stone, desperate and determined. Even those who come without belief often leave changed. Film crews working inside the abandoned prison for documentaries and music videos have reported strange malfunctions. Cameras shut off without reason, batteries drain instantly, and unexplained orbs appear in footage. One cameraman swore he felt a cold hand brush against his neck just as a loud bang echoed behind him. When he turned, the hallway was empty. Locals say the energy around Joliet hasn't lessened, even after years of decay. On still nights, faint light flickers from the watchtowers, though there's no electricity. Some claim to hear the clanging of the front gates, the metallic echo rolling through the empty lot where guards once stood. Nearby residents report that dogs refuse to go near the fence, growling at something unseen. Paranormal investigators believe that the emotional residue of suffering can stain a place forever. If that's true, then Joliet Correctional Center is soaked in it. For more than a century, men lived and died behind those walls, many unjustly, others unrepentant. The limestone, once quarried by their own hands, now serves as a silent tomb for their memories. Every stone, every corridor, carries a fragment of the anguish that once filled the air. Today, the prison remains a popular site for haunted tours, attracting thrill-seekers from across the country. Yet those who enter often leave uneasy, sensing they've brushed against something beyond understanding. Some speak of unseen footsteps following them to the exit. Others describe hearing faint laughter echoing from deep within the cell blocks. Even the guides, seasoned and skeptical, admit the place feels alive, as if it remembers every story, every crime, every desperate plea. They often end each tour the same way, standing before the massive steel gates that once sealed thousands inside. The final warning they give visitors isn't about the structure's danger or decay, but about respect. Don't mock them, they say quietly. The ones who lived here, they're still listening. As the last echoes fade and the doors groan shut, Joliet Correctional Center settles back into silence. The moonlight glints off the weathered stone, revealing fleeting shapes that seem to move between shadows. Perhaps they are tricks of the eye, or perhaps they are the remnants of lost souls, condemned to wander the Bloodstone Fortress forever. In the heart of Rollins, Wyoming, the Wyoming Frontier Prison stands as a grim testament to the darker side of the Old West. Built in 1901 and operational until 1981, its stone walls still whisper of pain, punishment, and the lost souls who met their end within. Known for its brutal conditions and notorious executions, the prison has since become one of the most haunted sites in the American frontier, a place where echoes of the condemned refuse to fade. The prison's construction began with hope for order in a lawless land. Carved from sandstone quarried nearby, the building was designed to hold those who brought chaos to the developing state. But the moment its iron gates shut for the first time, a heavy air of despair settled in. Inmates were crammed into narrow cells, with icy drafts in winter and stifling heat in summer. There was no plumbing in the early years, and punishments were harsh. Guards kept discipline through force, and fights between prisoners often turned deadly. Executions were part of life at the Wyoming Frontier Prison, public at first, and later moved behind closed doors. The gallows, still standing today, tell a story of fear and finality. Between 1912 and 1933, many men met their fate on that wooden platform. Their crimes varied: murder, theft, even revenge, but their final moments were united in terror. Witnesses to the hangings often reported the same chilling detail. Some men struggled for minutes, their choking gasps echoing through the courtyard long after the trapdoor fell. Those sounds, it is said, never truly stopped. Modern visitors on guided tours report hearing the unmistakable noises of strangled breathing and muffled cries near the execution area. Many describe feeling an invisible pressure on their throats or cold fingers brushing the back of their necks. One guide swore she heard the faint creak of the gallows ropes, though they had long since been removed for preservation. The most famous execution was that of Andrew Pixley, a convicted murderer executed in 1965. He was among the last men put to death in Wyoming before the gas chamber replaced a noose. His death, slow and panicked, was said to have filled the room with an unbearable tension. Decades later, some who enter the chamber claim to feel that same suffocating dread. Paranormal investigators report sudden temperature drops, flickering lights, and the sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. One visitor fainted after claiming she saw a figure materialize in the gas chamber's reflection window, a pale face with hollow eyes staring back at her. Beyond the execution area, the cell blocks themselves hold their own ghosts. The solitary confinement cells, known by inmates as the hole, were especially cruel. Prisoners placed there endured total darkness and silence, often for days at a time. Many left broken, their sanity stripped away. Today, those who dare to step inside the hole describe an overwhelming wave of panic, as though something unseen still lurks in the corners. Visitors have reported hearing faint whispers, sometimes their own names spoken in low, rasping tones. One man fled the cell after feeling what he described as ice-cold hands pressing against his shoulders. Even the prison yard carries an eerie presence. During its active years, dozens of men died violently in fights, botched escapes, or at the hands of their fellow inmates. It's said that the spirits of those who never received a proper burial still roam the grounds. On moonlit nights, security guards patrolling after hours have spotted flickering shapes moving along the old stone walls, like shadows with no source. Others hear the distant rattle of keys, or the metallic clang of cell doors slamming when no one is there. The women's cell block, though smaller, has its own dark legacy. Only a few female inmates ever served time at Wyoming Frontier Prison, but one in particular, a woman named Lydia, is said to linger still. Convicted of poisoning her husband, Lydia was kept isolated from the men and died mysteriously before her release. Visitors to her former cell often detect the scent of perfume, faint and floral, even though the air elsewhere reeks of dust and decay. Some say a soft humming can be heard, as though she still sings to herself in the afterlife. Not all spirits here seem malicious. Some, perhaps, are merely lost. Former guards who have revisited the prison tell of hearing boots pacing the upper catwalks, the rhythm steady and familiar. One retired officer recognized the sound as belonging to a fellow guard who died decades earlier. "He's still making his rounds," he said quietly, refusing to step inside again. Paranormal teams from across the country have investigated Wyoming Frontier Prison, and nearly all leave with unexplained evidence. Photos show strange orbs hovering in empty corridors, faces appearing through the bars of deserted cells. EVPs capture disembodied voices saying, "Help me," or "Let me out." A few recordings feature faint laughter that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. During one overnight investigation, a group set up cameras near the gallows. In the dead of night, one camera picked up movement, a shadow stepping forward, as though a figure had just been led to the platform. Then, a sound followed, a heavy thud, like a trapdoor falling open. Every camera immediately shut off. When the team reviewed the footage later, the audio contained one final whisper before the cut: "It's my turn." Today, the Wyoming Frontier Prison operates as a museum, offering tours to the brave and the curious. Guides tell stories of escape attempts, riots, and the daily brutality that once defined life inside. But the supernatural tales linger strongest in the memory. Some guests enter skeptics and leave believers, convinced they felt the presence of the men who never truly left. As dusk settles over Rawlins, the old prison casts long shadows across the desert ground. The gallows stand like silent sentinels, a reminder of justice dealt in an unforgiving time. Yet in that silence, the past refuses to rest. The whispers return, the air turns cold, and somewhere deep within the stone corridors, a voice still pleads, not for forgiveness, but for release. The Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola Prison, sits on a vast expanse of land along the Mississippi River, its fields stretching as far as the eye can see. Often called the Alcatraz of the South, Angola carries a history steeped in blood, labor, and suffering. Before it became a prison, the land was a brutal slave plantation, where enslaved men and women toiled under the hot Louisiana sun, cultivating cotton and sugarcane while enduring harsh punishments. When the plantation was converted into a prison farm after the Civil War, much of that cruelty remained, only now it was inflicted upon inmates. Over the decades, Angola has gained a reputation as one of the most haunted locations in the United States, with both guards and prisoners reporting encounters that defy explanation. From the outside, Angola appears as a sprawling, isolated complex. The main prison buildings are surrounded by acres of farmland, tall fences, and guard towers. Visitors often comment on the heavy atmosphere, as if the land absorbs and holds every ounce of anguish that has occurred there. Those who walk the fields at night report seeing ghostly figures drifting among the rows of cane and corn, their shapes fleeting and transparent, vanishing when approached. Some claim these figures are former prisoners, forced to continue their labor even in death, while others believe they are the restless spirits of enslaved workers from the plantation era, condemned to roam the land forever. Sounds carry easily across Angola's open fields, and the nights are often filled with eerie noises. Guards on late shifts have described hearing chains rattling in the distance, though no prisoners are nearby. Some swear they have heard faint footsteps pacing across empty fields, accompanied by low moans that echo as though the voices are trapped within the soil itself. Prisoners themselves have recounted stories of unexplained noises at night, doors clanging, metal gates swinging open without wind, or whispers that seem to come from the darkness just beyond the dormitories. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a former inmate who worked on the farm in the early 1990s. He described walking through the sugarcane fields under a full moon when he noticed a shadowy figure ahead, moving slowly between the tall stalks. As he approached, the figure vanished, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and old earth. The experience left him shaken, and he told fellow inmates that he felt as if the land itself was watching, as if it remembered every life it had claimed over the decades. The prison cemetery, located in a remote corner of the property, adds another layer to Angola's haunted reputation. Many prisoners who died over the years were buried there, their graves marked with simple wooden crosses or small stones. Historical records suggest that some of the deceased were never identified, leaving their spirits unclaimed and restless. Visitors and staff have reported seeing shadowy figures walking among the graves at night, or hearing whispers that seem to drift across the fields, carried on the Louisiana wind. Some say that the spirits here are not malevolent, but are instead bound to the land by the suffering they endured, their presence a reminder of the prison's dark legacy. The prison's reputation for hauntings is not limited to the fields or cemetery. Inside the dormitories and work buildings, strange occurrences are frequently reported. Lights flicker without explanation, doors open and close on their own, and cold drafts pass through rooms even when windows are tightly sealed. Some guards have claimed to feel an unseen presence following them through corridors, or to hear footsteps echoing behind them when no one is there. These incidents have become so common that they are often treated as part of Angola as eerie ambience rather than isolated occurrences. Even the animals on the property seem sensitive to the prison's energy. Horses and mules, used in agricultural work, have been known to refuse to enter certain areas, growling or spooking at nothing visible. Dogs brought onto the property sometimes howl or retreat, reacting to sounds and movements imperceptible to their human handlers. Some employees believe that animals can sense the lingering spirits more keenly than people can, and their reactions serve as warnings to those nearby. Angola Prison stands as a living testament to a dark history, from its origins as a plantation to its current status as a maximum security prison. The land is marked by centuries of human suffering, and the echoes of the past are ever present. Lights in the distance, chains rattling under the moon, shadowy figures among the fields. These are the remnants of lives shaped by pain, confinement, and forced labor. Inmates, guards, and visitors alike have all reported experiences that suggest the past has never truly left Angola. The prison, its land, and its people are bound together in a history that refuses to fade. And for those who spend time on the property after dark, the sense of watching eyes and restless spirits is impossible to ignore. The Arizona Territorial Prison, perched on a hill overlooking the desert town of Yuma, Arizona, is more than just a historic site. Built in 1876 to contain the territory's most dangerous criminals, the prison quickly gained a reputation for harsh conditions and brutal discipline. Today, it operates as a museum, its preserved cells and crumbling walls offering a glimpse into a grim past. Yet even as visitors walk its corridors, snapping photographs and exploring the old cell blocks, the air carries a weight far beyond history, the lingering presence of those who once suffered and died within its walls. From the moment the prison opened, it was designed to instill fear and enforce control. Inmates endured overcrowded cells, grueling labor, and extreme temperatures. Desert summers made the iron bars unbearably hot, while winter nights cut through the stone and mortar with biting cold. Disease spread quickly in the confined spaces, claiming lives before relief could arrive. Punishments were severe. Men were placed in solitary confinement, forced into hard labor, or subjected to prolonged periods of deprivation. The prison's notorious dark cell became the embodiment of that cruelty. The dark cell was a small, windowless chamber where prisoners were left in total isolation. Light and sound were almost entirely blocked, and inmates often received only bread and water. Those sent there for days or weeks emerged broken, disoriented, and sometimes mad. Historical accounts tell of men who did not survive the isolation, their bodies and minds crushed by the extreme conditions. Today, the dark cell is the focal point of many ghost stories and paranormal investigations. Its oppressive energy still palpable to those who enter. Tourists and ghost hunters alike report hearing faint sobs or cries coming from the dark cell, even when no one else is nearby. Cameras have captured misty forms hovering in the corners of the cell block, shapes that vanish when approached or photographed from different angles. Some visitors describe feeling cold spots, sudden chills, or the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Many insist that the energy of the prisoners who endured unimaginable suffering remains trapped here, repeating their torment for anyone who dares to enter. Beyond the dark cell, the rest of the prison is not free from eerie occurrences. The main cell block, with its rows of iron bars and narrow walkways, often carries unexplained sounds. Visitors have reported doors opening and closing on their own, footsteps echoing along empty corridors, and whispers that seem to drift from empty cells. Some have described seeing shadows moving across the walls, or fleeting figures standing at the end of a hallway, vanishing when approached. Even the desert wind seems to carry voices, faint but distinct, as if the prison itself remembers every scream, every plea for mercy. Former staff and tour guides share their own chilling experiences. One guide recounted leading a group through the dark cell when the lights flickered inexplicably. He claimed to feel a cold breath against his neck and heard a soft whisper that said, "Leave." Such reports are common at the museum, adding to the prison's reputation as one of the most haunted sites in Arizona. The cemetery near the prison also holds a spectral presence. Many inmates who died within the prison walls were buried in unmarked graves nearby. Paranormal investigators report seeing shadowy figures moving among the markers, as if the dead are still pacing the grounds, unable to rest. Some have captured faint voices on recording devices, calling out in pain or whispering names long forgotten. The cemetery's energy reinforces the sense that the prison's history is not confined to the walls, but extends into the surrounding landscape. Despite its grim past, the Arizona Territorial Prison draws visitors from across the country. Tourists are drawn not only by history but by the chance to experience its chilling ambience firsthand. Cameras, audio recorders, and personal encounters consistently document unusual phenomena, misty forms, unexplained cold spots, and distant sobs. The dark cell, in particular, remains a magnet for those seeking evidence of the supernatural. Its small, windowless interior amplifying every sound, every movement, every lingering emotion. The Charleston Workhouse in South Carolina sits quietly now, its remnants scattered among the modern streets of the city. Yet beneath the soil, beneath the soft hum of passing cars and the distant sound of the harbor, the ground remembers. What was once a place of punishment and despair still seems to breathe with the agony of those who suffered there. The Charleston Workhouse, once a grim institution used to discipline both enslaved people and later prisoners, is said to be one of the most haunted spots in the South, a place where cries for mercy still pierce the stillness of the night. Built in the early 1700s, the workhouse stood as a symbol of Charleston's dark past, where brutality was woven into daily life. Enslaved men and women accused of disobedience or escape were sent there for correction. The punishments were severe, often fatal. Whips cracked against flesh as overseers carried out the orders of slave owners who wanted their property disciplined. Iron shackles clanged as prisoners were dragged across cold stone floors. It wasn't just a place of confinement, it was a factory of suffering. When slavery was abolished, the building did not rest. It simply changed its purpose, becoming a city jail where poor citizens, vagrants, and petty criminals were confined in the same cells that once held enslaved souls. The screams that once echoed through the halls became whispers, and the walls absorbed the endless grief. The city grew around it, but the energy of what happened there never faded. Locals say the building, or what remains of it, hums with something unnatural, something deeply sorrowful. Visitors who walk the grounds after dark often speak of hearing the faint clank of metal chains dragging across the cobblestones, as if the prisoners are still being moved to punishment. Some describe hearing rhythmic sobbing echoing through the air, low and mournful, even when they stand completely alone. Others have heard the desperate words, "mercy" and "please," whispered close to their ears, though no one is near. In the mid-20th century, before the last parts of the structure were torn down, workers reported strange happenings during renovation attempts. Tools went missing, only to reappear hours later in strange places. Doors slammed without wind. Footsteps echoed through the corridors, even when every man was accounted for. One night, a security guard refused to return to his post after he heard what he described as chains being dragged across stone and the sound of someone gasping for air. He said it felt like the whole building was alive, breathing around him. Paranormal investigators have since visited what's left of the workhouse site, using modern equipment to capture evidence of what lingers there. Recordings have revealed soft weeping and faint metallic clinks, even when the area is silent. Some visitors have captured strange mists on their cameras, forming vague human shapes near where the old cells once stood. One investigator described seeing a faint blue light drift through the ruins, moving as though carried by an unseen hand, before vanishing into the ground. Even in daylight, the place feels heavy. Those who work nearby sometimes avoid walking past it altogether, claiming that even from a distance, it feels like someone is watching. Dogs often refuse to cross certain spots on the property, growling or whining as their owners tug their leashes. One of the most chilling stories comes from a local historian who once spent a night on-site collecting artifacts. He said he had set up his equipment and was sitting quietly, taking notes, when he heard a dragging sound, slow and steady, as if someone were pulling something heavy across the floor. The sound grew louder until it was just behind him. When he turned, the air felt icy cold, and he saw nothing. But the next morning, when he reviewed his audio recordings, the dragging sound was there, followed by a weak, trembling voice whispering, "No more." The ghost stories that swirl around the Charleston Workhouse are not just tales of the supernatural. They are echoes of a brutal history that refuses to be forgotten. Every cry, every clink of chains, Every phantom whisper seems to remind visitors of the cruelty inflicted within those walls. Some believe the spirits that haunt the site are not trapped there, but rather they return drawn to the place where they endured their greatest pain. Local legends tell of a woman in white who appears near the site's old courtyard, believed to be the spirit of an enslaved mother who died there after being separated from her child. Witnesses claim she glides silently through the mist, her face streaked with tears, before fading into the darkness. Others have reported a tall, shadowy figure, possibly a former overseer, standing motionless at the edge of the property, as though keeping watch, forever guarding a prison that no longer exists. Even the nearby residents, generations removed from those dark times, have stories. One woman who lives in a townhouse built near the old workhouse foundation says that sometimes, around midnight, she hears what sounds like a whip cracking in the distance, followed by a faint cry. When she looks outside, the street is empty. The haunting of the Charleston workhouse is a reminder that pain leaves a mark deeper than stone. The walls may have crumbled, the iron may have rusted away, but the suffering and the memories remain. In the quiet of a humid Charleston night, when the fog rolls in from the harbor, the echoes rise again. The sound of dragging chains, the low moan of the forgotten, the desperate whisper asking for mercy. The North Dakota State Penitentiary, located in Bismarck, stands as one of the oldest and most storied correctional facilities in the northern United States. Its gray stone walls have witnessed over a century of incarceration, violence, and tragedy. Among the many stories tied to its history, one event stands out above all: a devastating fire in the early 1900s that claimed the lives of numerous inmates and left a scar not just on the building but on the land itself. Even today, visitors and staff alike report strange phenomena, a lingering presence that seems to echo the horrors of that fateful night. When the penitentiary first opened in the late 19th century, it was designed to hold a growing population of prisoners in a developing state. The building was constructed with thick stone and heavy timber, intended to withstand the harsh northern winters. Yet, the materials that made it strong also made it deadly in the event of fire. Life inside was harsh. Inmates faced strict routines, grueling labor, and a cold, impersonal system of punishment. The corridors were lined with cells so small that privacy was impossible, and the air often carried the stench of unwashed bodies and smoke from coal stoves used to heat the wings. In the winter of 1910, a fire broke out in the east wing of the penitentiary. No one knows exactly how it started. Some accounts blame a malfunctioning stove. Others claim a discarded ember from the heating system. Whatever the cause, the fire spread with frightening speed through the wooden floors and ceilings. Guards tried desperately to save the inmates, but the narrow corridors and locked cell doors made escape nearly impossible. Flames consumed the building, and thick smoke filled the hallways. Many prisoners perished before anyone could reach them, their cries for help echoing through the stone halls and out into the night. Those who survived the fire described a scene of unimaginable horror. Men emerged coughing and screaming, their faces blackened by soot, eyes wide with shock. The fire burned for hours, leaving charred walls and scorched floors, a permanent mark of death and despair. The bodies of those who died were quickly removed and buried in unmarked graves near the prison grounds, leaving little to memorialize their lives or their suffering. Even today, more than a century later, the penitentiary carries the weight of that tragedy. Visitors report sudden, inexplicable heat waves in areas where the fire never reached. Some feel a stifling warmth on frigid winter nights, as if the flames are still alive, licking the walls and hallways. Others have smelled the faint scent of burning wood or coal. Even when the building's heating systems are off and the air outside is bitterly cold, it is as if the fire's memory lingers, searing the present with the echoes of the past. Paranormal investigators who have explored the penitentiary describe seeing smoky silhouettes drifting through the corridors. Some resemble figures of inmates, hunched or pacing, only to vanish into thin air when approached. Lights flicker without explanation, and shadows appear where none should exist. Visitors in the East Wing, where the fire began, have reported hearing faint screams, coughing, and the distant sound of shuffling feet. The noises often stop abruptly, leaving the area silent but charged with tension. The cells themselves are a focal point for unusual activity. Many guests have reported sudden chills while standing in the former cell blocks, followed by the smell of charred wood or smoke. One visitor claimed to see a faint outline of a man pressed against the bars, his features indistinct, but his posture unmistakably pleading. Cameras have captured strange orbs in misty forms hovering near the old East Wing, evidence that some part of the inmate's presence refuses to dissipate. Staff members who work at the penitentiary, especially those assigned to night shifts, have their own accounts. One guard described walking down a hallway in the winter, doors locked and hallways empty, when he felt an intense heat on his back. Turning quickly, he saw nothing, but later noticed that the smell of smoke had lingered on his uniform. Another reported hearing the faint sound of doors opening and closing in the East Wing. Though all locks were checked and no one was present, these experiences, though unsettling, are so common that they are considered part of the penitentiary's aura, an invisible layer of history pressed against the present. The prison yard, too, is not free from whispers of the past. On cold, quiet nights, some visitors say they can hear faint cries from the graves of the fire's victims. Carried faintly on the wind, shadowy figures are occasionally seen moving across the snow-covered yard, seeming to trace the steps of those who died long ago. Dogs brought onto the property sometimes growl or refuse to move, reacting to sights and sounds invisible to their owners. There are also reports of emotional sensations that cannot be easily explained. Visitors often describe sudden feelings of dread or sadness when walking through the East Wing. Some have claimed to feel a heavy weight on their chest, as if someone unseen presses down, reliving the panic and fear of the fire. A few have even said they heard whispers of names being called softly, as though the deceased inmates are trying to reach someone in the world of the living. Despite the passage of time, the North Dakota State Penitentiary continues to function as a correctional facility, but it is also a magnet for those drawn to its haunted reputation. Tours are occasionally conducted for historians and paranormal enthusiasts, and every visitor leaves with a sense of awe, tinged with unease. Cameras and recording devices frequently capture anomalies, mists, unexplained shadows, or flickering lights that cannot be attributed to equipment malfunction. The legacy of the fire is a constant presence. The stone walls, the narrow corridors, and the charred remains of the old East Wing seem to hold memory in every brick. The penitentiary's tragic history is not just a story of past events. It is an ongoing experience, visible and invisible, felt by anyone who steps across its threshold. The ghosts of those who perished in the flames linger, replaying their final moments for anyone who will listen. Deer Island Prison, perched on the remote stretch of Boston Harbor, carries a reputation as one of the most haunting sites in Massachusetts. Built on an isolated island, surrounded by cold, choppy waters and dense fog, the prison held thousands over its long history, many of whom died from disease, neglect, and the harsh conditions of confinement. Even today, the island seems alive with echoes of its grim past. And locals, especially the fishermen who navigate the waters at night, tell stories that suggest the suffering that occurred there has left a permanent mark. Construction of Deer Island Prison began in the mid-19th century, as Boston authorities sought a location to confine the city's growing population of prisoners, vagrants, and the indigent. Its isolation made it ideal for containment, but cruel in practice. Inmates were housed in stone and wooden buildings exposed to the harsh winds and salty air of the harbor. Winters were bitter, summers were sweltering, and disease spread with alarming speed. Smallpox, typhoid, and influenza took countless lives, while malnutrition and neglect compounded their misery. The island became a silent graveyard for many, with bodies buried in unmarked graves, their identities lost to time. The prison was not merely a holding facility. It was also a place of punishment and suffering. Reports from historical records describe overcrowded cells, poor sanitation, and inadequate medical care. Inmates who resisted authority or failed to perform menial labor were subjected to solitary confinement or other forms of harsh treatment. For many, the isolation of the island itself was a psychological torment. Being separated from the mainland, from family, from sunlight and fresh air, inmates often succumbed to despair long before disease or exhaustion claimed them. Even after Deer Island ceased functioning as a prison, the stories of suffering persisted. Fishermen navigating Boston Harbor on foggy nights have reported seeing strange lights moving across the water. Faint lantern glows that seem to float above the surface, then vanish suddenly. Some insist these lights are the spirits of prisoners, carrying torches or candles, forever retracing their final steps across the island. Others hear low, mournful cries carried over the waves. A mixture of anger, pain, and despair that no human voice could replicate. Visitors to the island in the modern day describe a similar sense of unease. The air feels heavy, and the wind carries whispers that seem to come from the ruins themselves. Footsteps echo in areas where no one stands. Doors that were long sealed open with a creak, then slam shut unexpectedly. Some have seen shadowy figures move among the remnants of the old prison walls. Figures too human to be mistaken for wind-blown debris, yet fading when approached. Paranormal investigators have recorded faint voices, moans, and the sound of chains rattling, even in sections of the island that were long abandoned and empty. One of the most notorious areas was the isolation ward, a building set apart from the main prison where the sick, the rebellious, and the weak were confined. Inmates here were often left to suffer without proper care, and many died alone, their cries echoing through the empty halls. Today, visitors report sudden chills and heavy, oppressive air in that section of the island, as though the weight of all those deaths still lingers. Some have felt invisible hands brush against them, or heard breathing close behind their ears, though no one is present. The fog that often blankets the harbor seems to amplify the island's eerie presence. Fishermen describe the fog thickening around them as they approach Deer Island, obscuring navigation and creating shapes that flicker in the corner of their eyes. Some claim to have seen faint silhouettes pacing along the shore, dressed in tattered clothing, before vanishing into the mist. Others hear faint footsteps echoing over the water, as though the dead are walking along the pier, trapped between the island and the mainland. Many locals believe the hauntings are connected to the countless unmarked graves on the island. Bodies were often buried quickly, without ceremony, and the names of those interred were forgotten. Paranormal enthusiasts suggest that these restless spirits linger near their burial sites, seeking acknowledgement or simply unable to leave the place where they suffered. When the wind carries the cries of the deceased across the harbor, it is said that the living can sense the profound anguish that still inhabits Deer Island. Even modern structures on the island seem touched by this lingering presence. Sightings of unexplained lights, moving shadows, and sudden cold spots have been reported in areas that were repurposed or rebuilt after the prison's closure. Some say the prison's energy has infused the island itself, creating a permanent connection between the past and present. Those who visit often feel a sense of being watched, as though unseen eyes follow every movement across the barren grounds. One story tells of a lone fisherman who was returning to Boston late at night. As he neared Deer Island, a thick fog rolled in, and he saw lantern-like lights dancing on the water. He heard faint sobs over the sound of waves, desperate and pleading. Terrified, he turned his boat around, only to find the fog lifting and the lights disappearing as if they had never been there. He later learned of the history of the prison and became convinced that he had witnessed the lingering spirits of inmates who had perished long ago. The haunting reputation of Deer Island Prison is a reminder of the human suffering endured there. The physical structures may have been partially demolished or repurposed, but the echoes of anguish remain. Visitors often leave with a sense of solemnity and unease, a feeling that they have glimpsed something beyond the realm of the living. The cries, the shadows, the lights in the fog, all serve as a testament to a dark chapter in Massachusetts history. We've walked through 25 prisons, each dark with history and whispered horror. These are not just buildings, they are tombs of human suffering, memory, and regret. They stand as monuments to cruelty and human frailty, but also to the persistence of history. The most haunted prison may be none at all, but the spirits who linger refuse to forget. Thank you for coming tonight into this world of shadows and steel. If your blood still hums and your mind races, you've touched a place where the past refuses to sleep. Like the ghosts behind iron bars, may your curiosity linger, but step lightly, for some doors, once opened, never truly close. Until next time, be brave, stay curious, and always walk the dark corners of history with care.